So good morning, Canada. Good afternoon, Eurasia. My name is Tatiana Damlaskaya. I'm the regional director of the CERBA-Vancouver chapter, and I will open this conference today. Um, Actually, today is a good day to kick off the CERBA-Eurasia Mining Series 2022 because it's Lunar New Year. So Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to the 11th CERBA-Vancouver International Conference in conjunction with the IME Roundup 2022. The topic we discuss today is mining in changing and challenging climate conditions, regional trends, innovations, and opportunities, where we try to address a number of vitally important issues that mining industry is dealing in the meantime. Before I start, let's do a little bit of technical remarks to help the audience get familiar with our system and its features. The conference is conducted with simultaneous English-Russian translation. To switch between the languages, you need to click on the globe sign on the bottom of your screen and choose the language of your preference. I repeat it in Russian for people who doesn't speak English. Дамы и господа, доброе утро. Сегодня мы открываем нашу горную конференцию. Я хотела бы сделать небольшую ремарку для тех, кто хотел бы слушать эту конференцию на разных языках. Внизу вашего экрана вы увидите маленький значок глобуса. На него нужно кликнуть и выбрать тот язык.
Just repeating the same that Tatiana said in English, again reminding about the globe icon to click on if you want to switch from one to another.
To ensure that we don't have any background noises, because this event will be recorded and it is important for us to have a clear sound. Please don't hesitate to submit your questions to speakers in the chat box. You can see the chat box also on the bottom of your screen. Just type it in Russian or English. If the language is not as needed, then we will translate it for the speaker to whom this question will be addressed. Please notice that the event will be recorded, again, as I mentioned, and the record of this event will be posted after the event on the YouTube page of our organization. Now I would like to say a few words about our sponsors and supporters. First of all, I would like to express our gratitude to B2Gold, a distinguished Vancouver-based member that stays with our organization from the very beginning of CERBA in Vancouver in 2010. B2Gold is actually an initiator of the CERBA-Vancouver International Mining Conference on the margins of AME Roundup, which has successfully lived already for 11 years. Today, B2Gold is also a gold sponsor of the Vancouver International Mining Conference 2022. The vice president of this company on government relations, Neil Reeder, will be speaking at the second panel of the conference. I also would like to mention our partners is the Association of Mineral Explorations, our long-term partners since 2010, and also the Canadian Permafrost Association, which is a relatively new partner for us, but this is an organization who is working with us to address very important issues that mining industry is dealing in the meantime. I also would like to mention the Global Affairs Canada. The support they give to our sectoral initiative within the CAN Expert program is one of the most significant indicators of the importance of work that CERBA does between Canada and Eurasia. Now, I would like to pass the stage to the moderator of our very first part of the conference. I would like to introduce the chair of CERBA-Vancouver chapter, president of ECMB Capital Partners, and the honorary consul of Russia in Vancouver, Erin Campbell. Erin provides board and advisory leadership to growth-focused public and private international resource and technology industrial companies requiring finance, mergers, acquisition, offtake, partnerships, corporate restructure, government relations, and business development. Erin, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Tatiana, and it's a great pleasure to welcome everybody to our 11th CERBA Vancouver International Mining Conference in conjunction with AIM-BC. This is a conference that over the years has been a really important contributor to growing connections between Canada, Eurasia, particularly in the mining industry. And it's just a great pleasure to have so many distinguished guest representatives from a number of member nations in Eurasia, including Kazakhstan, Russian Federation, Republic of Uzbekistan, and Mongolia as well. So we're very pleased. I'm also very pleased that we have representation from the Government of Canada through the Ambassador of Canada to the Republic of Kazakhstan as well. So welcome everybody. I hope this will be a very informative morning program for you. I think we all look forward to the day when we can gather together in person again and share the camaraderie and fellowship that comes with an in-person event. But until that time, CERBA will continue to try to develop programming that meets the needs of business connections around the world. I would just like to reiterate what Tatiana mentioned about our sponsors. Without our sponsors, it would be very, very challenging for us to deliver a high quality program to our members and stakeholders. So again, I would like to also reiterate our thanks to B2 Gold in particular, our gold sponsor. They've been a tireless supporter of CERBA in the time that I've been involved, and certainly before then as well. AIM-BC, who hosts a very important mining conference every year in Vancouver at this time, the Vancouver Roundup Conference. Canada Permafrost Association, Global Affairs Canada through their critical can export program, and the Mining Advisory Council as well. I would like now to introduce, for those of you who don't know, Gilles Breton. Gilles is our chair of the CERBA National Board of Directors. He is retired now from Ministry of Foreign Affairs after a stellar 36-year career supporting the endeavors of the Canadian government and Canadians all over the world, including Russia and Eurasia. He also is a very well-known and well-followed commentator on issues surrounding Eurasia, and I would welcome you to reach out to get on his mailing list, because it's quite spectacular the amount of research and commentary he's able to provide for people that are keen followers of developments in the region. So Gilles, I will hand it over to you. I look forward to hearing your remarks. And then following Gilles, we will have greetings from His Excellency Alan Hampson, who's the Ambassador of Canada to Kazakhstan. So Gilles, over to you.
Thank you very much, Erin, for these very kind words. Two kind words, actually. Dear participants, on behalf of the National Board of the Canada-Eurasia Russia Business Association, it is, as always, my pleasure to welcome you to this annual event. This year, the global context in which we have to operate offers us more challenges than I have time to discuss in detail during these brief introductory remarks. I will limit to myself to offer a few messages, as we have a very full program. The COVID-19 pandemic has tested our capacity to work at the development of the economic relationship between Canada and the countries of the Eurasian region. Today's event, with its very full program, is another example of the online events CERBA staff has produced for the past 2 years. Now, we have reason to be optimistic and hope that some of the events of the upcoming year will shift to an hybrid format with an in-person participation. It is a bit unusual, but I have to say a few words about the increase of tension in the Euro-Atlantic region We don't like to talk about politics too much at CERBA, but here we have little choice. More specifically, we have to talk about what's going on in Ukraine and the widespread concerns that have been mentioned in the media. And of course, there have been more opinions than it is possible to report. And as well, there has been considerable high-level diplomatic activity. So it's not for CERBA to offer political opinions or advice. But we can only express the hope that, as some indications suggest, diplomacy will prevail. Well, of course, we have to learn with some increased political tensions, but not let them take us away from our long-term objectives. I was reminded that one of my foreign service colleagues, who knows the region very well, from having worked in both Moscow and Kiev, just returned to Ukraine to start working on business development. So I would be inclined to follow example, keep calm, and continue to work at our long-term objectives. I should also mention that, of course, there have been unusual and complex events in Kazakhstan in early January. As with other similar situations, we should be focusing on our long-term objectives. In this case, we expect no obstacles to getting back to business with renewed determination. Political crisis situations may detract our attention temporarily from the other widely acknowledged challenge of global warming and climate change. Our British Columbia colleagues, with their recent unfortunate experiences, especially in the past year, would not easily forget this. We have made sure to make this an important theme of our discussions today. In the area of the exploitation of natural resources, sustainable development responses are neither a suggestion nor an imposition. They are now a market demand. And as we are doing today, we are maintaining our focus on this aspect of sustainable development. As it was mentioned, of course, by colleagues, and I think I would like to reiterate this event is supported by Global Affairs Canada, B2 Gold Corporation, as well as the Association of Mineral Exploration, Canadian Permafrost Association, as well as the Mining Advisory Council. And I think I should, as there will be no time to do this later, I would also like to express my gratitude to all our staff that has been working on this in the last few weeks and months, actually, and also thank those who are volunteering to participate in this event, especially my old colleague John Sloan, Vancouver-based, will have the word very shortly. So a quick word also about CERBA. For those who are not members, I would like to invite you to join and remind you that we are offering business development assistance in very different ways. And I think also what I would like to remind you of is that if you want to follow up on today's event, CERBA's regional directors are the best people to come to and seek assistance, because they know their business very well, and they can help you move your business into the region. So that is about it now for me. I will now like to ask our Ambassador Alan Hansen, the Ambassador of Canada to the Republic of Kazakhstan, as well as to Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, to say a few words. I would also like to take the opportunity to congratulate him on his appointment, which is very recent, and welcome it to our fold. So, Ambassador Hansen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jill. Khanim Darmin, Mirzalar, Dami, Gaspada, San Bainu, bonsoir, bonjour, excellencies, dear colleagues and friends. I am delighted to address the Canada Eurasia business community this soon after assuming my functions as ambassador just a couple of weeks ago, and having this early opportunity to see you all as I begin to represent Canada to three of our important partners in Central Asia. It's also a pleasure to see here on the line my esteemed colleague, His Excellency Akilbek Kamaldinov, Ambassador of Kazakhstan to Canada. I appreciated his valuable advice before I moved to Kazakhstan, which proved extremely useful as it was quite a busy first few weeks. And I'm sure that this is just the first of many times we'll be together at events like this. I'm only recently arrived in Kazakhstan, although I have had some other experiences working on trade and investment issues in Eurasia, previously covering Canada's significant relationship with Mongolia. And this experience showed me the importance of Eurasian countries in the global trade ecosystem. It also showed me the important role that the resource sector and mining play both in each country's development and in our bilateral trade and regional trade, a major element of our relationships. The growth of inclusive and sustainable trade is a priority for the Government of Canada. I'm pleased to know that this goal is shared across Eurasia. This year, 2022, is particularly auspicious for Canada-Eurasia ties as it marks the 30th anniversary of our bilateral relations with many of our partners in the region, notably in Central Asia. So building on these 30 years of friendship, I hope that we can advance our cooperation in the face of shared challenges such as climate change and to continue to grow our commercial relations. I know that you, our shared business community, are resilient. The numbers prove it. After a lull in 2020 due to the pandemic, our trade with Central Asia rebounded strongly in 2021. With Kazakhstan, for example, in the first 11 months of 2021 alone, our bilateral trade actually grew by 24% over pre-pandemic trade levels. Now, we're not done dealing with the challenge of COVID-19, of course, but we must also remain engaged in the fight against climate change, which I think is the biggest long-term threat facing our generation. It's also our greatest economic opportunity going forward. Our topic today, therefore, could not be more timely. Canada is a global leader in responsible and sustainable mining, guiding international standards and practices. Canadian companies are leading the way in geoscience, collecting data in new ways, using artificial intelligence to refine exploration programs and to improve operating efficiency. These firms are continuing a long history of innovation while working in some of the world's most remote and physically challenging environments. And they're helping mining companies around the world green their operations and ensure business sustainability. Events like this, linking our industries and sharing best practices, play an important role in making our mining sectors more sustainable, more accessible, and safer. These are the questions that our panelists today will discuss in detail. This is not, however, a conversation that can be finished in one night. Today is one of the series of conferences on mining innovation. And some of you, I'm sure, were disappointed that PDAC was moved from March to June. Others, though, might be quietly pleased because I can assure you Toronto was lovely in June. And hopefully by then we will be able to gather face-to-face to benefit from the whole host of things that meetings can bring us. And I know that the Government of Canada and the Canadian people look forward to hosting you soon in Toronto. In conclusion, I commend CERBA on organizing this timely and relevant conference. And my team and I are looking forward to the speakers and discussions. And more broadly, we look forward to working together with you on these issues, continuing these conversations here, offline after the conference, at PDAC, and other places we might meet, building our working relationships along the way. So with that, I wish you a successful conference. Hope I wasn't rushing too fast for the interpreter. Thank you all very much, and hope this turns out a great day. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Hampson, and again, congratulations on your appointment. These are interesting times to be working internationally, and I think we're all being calm and patient and finding our way through the complexity. So we're very lucky that we've got you on the ground there in Kazakhstan for all of us here in Canada. Moving forward to panel number 1, we are going to speak about cross-border updates in the Greater Eurasian resource sector. We have a great moderator for this panel. John Sloan served as Canada's ambassador to the Russian Federation, Armenia, and Uzbekistan from August 2010 to September 2013. He has a deep understanding of the space. He also has traveled and worked extensively in China and Tokyo as well. And he will be a master hand for us as we navigate a panel that includes some very, very interesting speakers and representatives from various Eurasian jurisdictions that have a keen interest in mining. So over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Erin, for those kind words. For several years now, I have moderated CERBA panels on the margins of the annual AIM Vancouver International Mining Conference. It is a particular pleasure for me to do so because both my grandfathers were prospectors and gold miners. And although they applied their expertise within British Columbia and the Northwest Territories in Canada, they both have mountains named after them in British Columbia. Governments have an important role in establishing the policy framework within which mining companies operate. In recent years, policies related to ESG, environment, social, and governance issues have rocketed up the priority scale. The effects of climate change and permafrost melt are being felt particularly in the north, where transport, roads and bridges, airports and mines are being directly affected. Certainly, this was already the case in 2012 when I visited Kinross's Kupol gold mine in Chukotka, Russia. Waste, pollution, and energy use are also issues high on the current agenda. Social policy, equality, and political stability are equally influential when it comes to where investors will invest and where mines will be built. And we cannot forget Indigenous issues and the particular challenges posed by remote communities and preserving traditional lifestyles. To address these issues today, we have official representatives from Kazakhstan, Russia, Uzbekistan, and Mongolia to discuss recent developments in their countries. As moderator, I will firmly but kindly limit each speaker to 8 minutes for the presentation. Questions will be delayed until after all three panels have presented. If you are not speaking, please turn your Zoom onto mute. I am assuming that you have all read the short bios in the conference brochure, so I will not repeat what you have already read. Our first presenter is Ambassador Kamaldivanov of Kazakhstan, currently posted to Ottawa, and previously Kazakh ambassador to Japan and Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. Ambassador.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure to welcome the participants of 11th CERBA-Vancouver Mining Conference. I would like to thank CERBA and Tatiana for having us here. This event became a good tradition. Hope next year we can meet in person. Taking this opportunity, I would like to share with you a short overview for the current situation in Kazakhstan. As some of you may already know, in the first week of January, my country has experienced a great tragedy. Experts confirmed that it was advanced, well-planned terroristic attacks on our country. These attacks threatened constitutional order and were assault on our statehood. Government large-scale efforts were made to stabilize the situation and restore constitutional legitimacy across the country. By President Tokayev's instruction, the special commission is holding a thorough investigation of committed crimes and violence acts. This commission includes experts, lawyers, and NGOs. Report on investigation results covering all details will be presented to the world community, including the United Nations, Human Rights Council, the OSCE, and all interested parties. As a state, as a nation, we have learned the necessary lesson from these tragic events, and of course, we will quickly recover. We are working on reforming public administration system, national security, and economic policy. We began a construction of a new Kazakhstan. The government of Kazakhstan will take comprehensive measures to restore the confidence of domestic and foreign investors and trade partners in our economy. All Kazakhstan obligations and guarantees to investors will be strictly followed and fulfilled. A new concept of investment policy will be developed to increase Kazakhstan investment attractiveness with due account of the increasing increasing role of environmental, social, and governance requirements, global green energy policy, and technological transition. Support of foreign investors in mining industry remains as an important priority. The government will provide large incentives for the exploration and development of new deposits for mining and other companies. Since we improved the business climate in Kazakhstan mining sector and adopted a new mining code, we are witnessing a great interest from Canadian junior mining companies to work in Kazakhstan. Some of them already started operation in our country. Today, Mr. Darrell Kling, President of Aras Minerals, will present you the project in Kazakhstan, which they started last year. In general, I can assure you that is the perfect time to do business in Kazakhstan. Currently, a new approach of doing business and new way of thinking is being formed right now in our country. The government will continue implementing measures to provide a more transparent environment in mining sector and improve business climate for doing business in Kazakhstan. We are working on providing more favorable conditions for foreign investors. It is a time of new opportunities. Development of trade, economic, and investment relations with Canada remains essential for our country. We are much looking forward to further develop business ties with Canadian companies, and the embassy is committed to ensure the safety of your business in Kazakhstan and supporting all of your projects and initiatives in our country. Despite the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, Canadian business community demonstrates resilience and the strong will to develop business in Kazakhstan. Our joint efforts led to remarkable increase of our trade and investment relations. Canadian companies invested more than 340 million Canadian dollars to the project in Kazakhstan in 9 months of 2021, which is the biggest amount in the last 9 years. In 2021, a trade turnover recovered to pre-pandemic level and exceeded 620 million Canadian dollars, which is also last 6 years high. We believe that our joint efforts aimed to continue our mutual beneficial business relations will benefit both of our countries. I am looking forward to meeting you in person as soon as restrictions will be lifted. In the meantime, please be assured that our embassy is at your disposal to discuss any issues of our interest. I wish all of you to stay safe. Right now, me and my team in Vancouver, and today we have a lot of meetings with Canadian companies. It is a great honor for me to be with you this morning, but unfortunately I have to leave you. Our presence will continue. My counselor Murat, and once again I wish you to stay safe. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for that update, Ambassador, and thank you also for sticking to the time limits. That was a very complete presentation. Again, if you are not speaking, please put your Zoom onto mute. I could hear at least one voice in the middle of the ambassador's presentation. Our second presenter is Ambassador Stepanov of the Russian Federation. He has been resident in Canada since April last year and previously was the director of the Foreign Policy Planning Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Moscow. Ambassador.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to be here at the 11th CERBA-Vancouver Mining Conference. The Embassy appreciates the efforts of the CERBA Board of Directors and its highly professional staff in hosting this traditional and much anticipated event, despite all COVID-19 related headwinds. Its scale and level of participation are yet another evidence of the reciprocal interest in strengthening the business ties between Canada and Russia, as well as with the Eurasian Economic Union and its close partners. The mining sector is a major common denominator that two our countries share. In Russia, as well as in Canada, the mining occupation has always commanded profound respect and been given due acknowledgement. The diligent work of these professionals has enabled both our countries to become recognized as global leaders with powerful manufacturing complex making its mark worldwide in iron, uranium, gold, diamonds, fertilizers, and other essential products. Its export contributes significantly to our national GDPs and creates thousands of job opportunities. And despite many bumps on the road, mining industries in Russia and Canada remain on the same page with regard to the conscientious approach relying on sustainable and eco-friendly technologies, innovations, and support of local communities. The gold production in Russia reached almost 320 metric tons in January-November 2021, with the Canadian flagship company Kinross Gold doing substantial share by successfully developing its mines Kupol and Divna in the Russian Chukotka Peninsula. Another local front runner, Silver Bear Resources, continues its operations with outstanding performance results in one of the highest grade silver project, Mangazeyski in Yakutia. Production of this precious metal in Russia amounted to nearly 860 tons within the same time frame. As a leading global producer of palladium, playing an important role in terms of reducing cable pollution, Russia has remained one of its largest suppliers to Canada, with over 45% increase in value terms throughout last January-November compared to previous period in 2020. There is also a significant 3-digit % growth in rhodium and copper exports from our country to Canada as well. Against the background of the COVID-19 pandemic and its multiple repercussions, the latest data indicates positive rebound of Russia-Canada bilateral trade, with almost 77% growth in January-November 2021, equaling nearly US $2 billion. It is still, of course, less than the 2008 year maximum of 3.2 billion and definitely below the potential that our countries share. However, given the circumstances, these figures could be regarded as both a modest success story and a small step in the right direction. In this context, the contribution of our cooperation in mining cannot be overstated. Despite all challenges, our national economy is standing firmly on its 2 feet while enhancing its resilience. In 2021, the Russian manufacturing sector increased by 5%, while GDP growth is expected at the level of 4.5%. Fixed capital investment was up 7.6% as of November, and we expect this indicator for the entire year to come in at 6%, up from 1.4% decline in 2020. Last year, Russia's trade surplus almost doubled, reaching 184 billion US dollars. Our foreign debt has decreased to around 4% of GDP, which is one of the lowest levels in the world. This January, Russia's international currency and gold reserves hit record of almost 640 billion US dollars. Besides, it is worth highlighting that no major foreign investment project has been suspended during the COVID-19 pandemic. The improvement of the business environment, making it more predictable and transparent, is one of the top priorities of the Russian government. This includes regulatory guillotine, sandboxes, mechanism of investment protection and promotion agreements, custom and tariff policies, as well as full implementation of the WTO agreement on trade facilitation. For sure, all those initiatives are focused on the mining industry as well. The amendments to the law on mining resources now secure better access to collected geological information. In 2019, the strategy for development of mineral resource base of the Russian Federation until 2035 was approved, providing a solid ground for balanced exploration, which would meet the long-term domestic and export demands. A lot can be said about Russia's efforts regarding environmental policy. There were a lot of initiatives taken by the government. Especially, the government adopted long-term development strategy with low greenhouse gas emissions to 2050, laying the foundation for fulfilling the task that President Putin set to reach carbon neutrality of Russia by 2060. At the same time, we are convinced that climate change issues should not be politicized, and we want to cooperate with business as to fight on the same side. And in this regard, all national regulatory climate measures taken so far are designed to encourage business projects and initiatives. Let me take a moment to highlight another important advantage of working in Russia for Canadian business. Against the backdrop of the current global trends, it is obvious that integration processes are gaining new momentum. And in this context, 7 years of the Eurasian Economic Union is a remarkable outcome of mutually beneficial partnership standing on the principles of equality and mutual respect of each other's interests. Besides opening up access to Russia's major trade partners, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Armenia, Kyrgyzstan, cooperation with the Eurasian Economic Union is broadening horizons even further, giving its impressive outreach. The interest towards establishing the dialogue with the Union is constantly increasing, with over 70 related formal proposals from third countries and international organizations pending, and about 10 concluded in the past year alone. Free trade agreements have been signed with Vietnam, Serbia, Singapore, Iran, with Iran interim at the moment, but on its way to full scale. Similar FTAs with Egypt and Israel are on the final track, and relevant negotiations are also underway with India as well as Indonesia and Mongolia. Moldavia, Uzbekistan, and Cuba are enjoying the observer state status, and there is also significant progress in the joint partnership between the EU and China's Belt and Road Initiative. A range of major indicators speak for themselves. In 2021, the volume of mutual trade between the EU member countries increased 31.3%, reaching a record high level of more than $70 billion US. Trade volume with third countries is blooming too, with foreign exports amounting to 500 billion and showing growth of 41% within 10 months of 2021. In January, November 2021, industrial production output was over 5% up compared to 2020, with total US $1.2 trillion. And according to preliminary assessment, the EU real GDP grew by 4.1% in 2021, returning to its pre-pandemic levels. Dear ladies and gentlemen, of course, there is obviously a lot more to share with you today. So I believe that the following discussions within the framework of this conference will provide the superb platform for getting additional helpful insights. And I'm using this opportunity to remind that in June this year, we are going to celebrate the 80th anniversary of Russia-Canada diplomatic relations. I believe, I remain optimistic about the future of our bilateral relations, and I believe that there is a lot we can do together to increase our mutually beneficial business projects. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Stepanov. And certainly I remember well the 70th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Russia and Canada when I was in Moscow. Our third presenter is Dr. Azam Kadyhodjayev, Deputy Chair of the Uzbekistan State Commission of Geology and Mineral Resources, who in this capacity has considerable interaction with international investors. Dr. Kadyhodjayev, please.
Thank you, John. Let us continue with presentation. Dear attendees of the conference, ladies and gentlemen, let me briefly inform you about the measures taken in Uzbekistan to attract potential investors to the mining and geological industry. Next slide, please. We are a state governing body that implements policy in the field of geological exploration, use, and protection of subsoil. We coordinate exploration, reveal mineral deposits, and gather all revealed information. Next slide. Concerning the mineral commodities, Uzbekistan is among top 10 leaders in terms of mineral reserves such as gold, silver, copper, uranium, tungsten, and other minerals. At the same time, country is quite developed in mining sector, particularly both mining companies, Navai and Almalik. Next slide, please. Navai and Almalik annually produce more than 100 tons of gold, that is 3.3 million ounces of gold, and about 150,000 tons of copper. That means a couple of tier 1 deposits exhausted each year. Plus, they need long-term huge resources, taking into account ambitious expansion plans in coming years. At the same time, global mineral commodity chains also affect our exploration programs. Growing demand, as we know, creates supply. Particularly, situation in Chile caused the vital chains on non-ferrous metals, especially now there is a high flow of copper. And given the significant resources of non-ferrous metals identified in Uzbekistan, government raised relevant response by resolution of copper cluster. Next slide. From upstream to downstream with a value-added product change. Accordingly, in the near future, we geologists are significantly increasing our exploration, geological exploration commitments. Now we promote the program on increasing in coming 5 years reserves for gold for more than 700 tons, 25 million ounces in coming 5 years, and for copper about 50 million tons. And there's the same situation for other minerals as well. And I speak only about proven reserves, plus there would be significant inferred resources as well. Next slide. And since the potential areas of the country studied only up to 40%, there is a huge perspectives of exploring more. That's why we implement long-term exploration programs to meet the demand of local mining companies as well as foreign investors. Moreover, there is a certain efforts towards improvement of investment climate in Uzbekistan. Particularly, we attracted international consultants from EBRD, World Bank, Boston Consulting Group, and prepared new mining code, which is already submitted to the government. And the main points for that is transition to international standards, as George code, introduction of block system for the allocation of areas with the license under first come first serve principle, and other international best practices. Next slide. In addition, recently they released specific measures to further improve the investment climate. Firstly, it refers to further reduction of royalty rates for base metals, for gold, silver, copper, uranium, tungsten, and others. Secondly, they canceled the practice of collecting bonuses, that is a license fee for geological exploration and production, mining. And third, they adopted measures on exemption of subsoil users from land tax at the stage of exploration. And other, next slide, and other custom support and incentives which directly contribute to the development of junior mining and related geological services. Moreover, next slide please, reforms made in last years towards the improvement of investment climate resulted in initiation of new joint projects with such world-class partners as Arana Mining, France, our Canadian partners, V2 Gold, Japan Oil, Gas and Metals Corporation, JOGMEC, Turkish Geological Survey, and many others, with a total cost of projects more than $3.6 billion. Next slide. Also in 2020, government improved the procedure for issuing licenses under the online auction base. As a result, 26 geological objects were sold through auctions in 2021. Oncoming March, the next auctions will be held for another new 25 geological objects, to which we kindly invite all of you to attend. Next slide. We really believe that all these measures shall surely improve the mining sector of Uzbekistan, taking into account rich mineral base and access to the infrastructure. You are most welcome to invest in Uzbekistan. Thank you. If there is some information needed, next slide, we have contacts. Please refer to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kadehojaev. And thank you again for sticking to our time limits. That was a very interesting update. And now our final two presenters represent Mongolia. First is Ambassador Yadma, who assumed his role in Canada in 2018. And the second pre-recorded presentation is by Deputy Minister Batnayram Dal, Deputy Minister for Mining and Heavy Industry of Mongolia. Ambassador Yadma.
Thank you, John. Excellencies, Mr. Chairman, distinguished friends, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by thanking CERBA for hosting this 11th CERBA-Vancouver International Conference. I am attending in this conference 5th times, and Mongolia will continue to attend this conference, and given the significance that is Mongolia is attending this regional mining developments. And this year, Mongolia is celebrating 100th anniversary of mining industry established in Mongolia. And one of the events occurred in this year was we launched one of the international mining project named OT, Oyu-Tolga, underground mining 6 days ago. And since then, we noticed that on the international stock, that among the lot of rates, just only a few Mongolia listed companies have the greens. So we believe that it is just a great trust given by international investors to Mongolia. So since just I invited and the invitation also just to CERBA, my deputy minister has kindly accepted his participation. So therefore, just I'm trying to save time, and I'm trying not to repeat what he will speak. And so I would like to introduce my deputy minister. He studied in Norway and United States, and he made master's degree of banking in Harvard University. And he is working as deputy minister since 2020.
Good morning, all. On behalf of the Ministry of Mining and Heavy Industry, I would like to greet all distinguished government officials, prospectors, investors, and suppliers participating in this year's AME Roundup. This year marks 100th anniversary of the Mongolian modern mining industry. Over the last 100 years, large mining deposits have been discovered and turned into economic activities, bringing social and economic prosperity to local communities and the local economy. The projects like Oyu-Tolga and Tawan-Tolga have attracted substantial local and foreign investments within the last 30 years, playing a crucial role in the economy. Last week, Oyu-Tolga underground mine opening ceremony took place here in Mongolia, putting the mine on track to become one of the top 5 largest copper mines in the world once the underground operation reaches full production. The government of Mongolia is committed to creating transparent and stable environment, ensuring economic stability and protecting investors' interest. The mining sector plays a significant role in our economy. It accounts for a quarter of our GDP and more than 90% of our total exports and more than 70% of our foreign direct investments and 30% of our state budget. As mineral exploration is a vital prerequisite for mining development, the government action plan for 2022-2024 specifically states to increase the mineral reserves by accelerating geological survey funded by the state budget. To this end, the state budget allocated for geological survey has significantly increased year on year. As part of our government initiative a new recovery policy. We are working to introduce comprehensive reform in the geological and mining sector, in accelerating geological survey, and attract more foreign direct investment into exploration projects. Currently, there are 896 exploration and 1,751 mining licenses valid in Mongolia, which covers approximately 4% of our total territory. We have recently revised mineral licensing procedure and had it approved by the government. So more exploration license can be granted through competitive selection and application in line with international best practices. So we are very optimistic that adopting this revision and procedure will release more exploration areas and lead to more mineral deposits to be discovered. And I'm delightful to inform you that the government is planning to grant approximately 400 to 500 new mining licenses in 2020. So which is equivalent to the total number of licenses issued in the last 7 years. All government and state services are now delivered remotely as part of the Digital Nation initiative in exploration to mining closure. Also, above mentioned exploration license application and all related activities will be held digitally or online. In the current global pandemic, COVID-19, the world faces many challenges. Mining is no exception. Disruption in mineral exploration, mining, supply chains, and cross-bordering for mining products can be addressed through technological advancement, adaptive geology, and mining and mutually beneficial cooperation. Looking into the future, by 2050, the world population is projected to reach 9.7 billion, 68% of whom will be living in urban areas. It is estimated that 66% of urbanization will occur in Asia, countries like China and India, and that renewable energy and electric cars will increase accordingly. Demand for commodities such as copper, steel, and rare earth elements will increase due to the infrastructure required for urbanization. This ever-growing demand for metals will be met by accelerating geological survey and mineral exploration today. Finally, I would like to reiterate that there is an extensive opportunity to work with you, the mineral explorers, prospectors, and investors. I would like to emphasize Mongolia has excellent geological potential and is actively working to introduce the best practice of the countries and that have successfully developed mining and improved the legal environment. Thank you. I wish you every success and good health.
Well, after a couple of glitches, I marvel at the accomplishments of modern technology. Thank you, Ambassador Yadma. That was a very interesting presentation. And that brings us to the end of panel one. I thank all our presenters for most interesting updates. And I now turn to panel two and its moderator, Lucas Aronson.
Thank you very much for giving me now the opportunity to introduce the panel two. And I also like to thank all the panelists from panel one to give us such an excellent overview. And it's a great introduction to the next session, which we're going to talk about innovation in mining, accessibility, safety, and sustainable development. I mean, as we heard, climate change is the most challenging challenge, if you wish, that is laying ahead of us. And if we want to be successful in the energy transition, mining must play a key role. We just heard it in the previous presentation. And mining is going to get more challenging due to the areas where we're mining. We're getting to more remote areas, permafrost, thaw, climate change, extreme weather, droughts. These are all challenges that the mining industry is facing. In addition, we also have sustainability challenges. We're working in a transparent world, so we'll have to be transparent as within the mining industry. Indigenous owned lands, another extremely challenging environment we work in. So as such, I think we need innovation, and the mining industry has been historically very innovative in the past. And I'm sure the mining industry is also the industry that's going to be innovative in getting us forward and helping the transition into a green energy. We do have a slight change in the order. Dr. Michael Currow will be a little bit later. So we're going to start with the first presenters, which is Mr. Ben Chalmers, Vice President of the Mining Association of Canada. And with previous presenters, you'll find detailed bios in the program that was sent around earlier. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ben. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join you today, and I'm hoping I can get my slides up here. But while that's happening, I just, by way of sort of introduction, I mean, all of the items that you pointed to in your introduction are all part of the focus of towards sustainable mining and what I'm going to talk about today. Climate change, Indigenous relationships, transparency is fundamental to the work that we do at the Mining Association of Canada, and how we have been working to share the innovations that we've brought to sustainability through towards sustainable mining with our members to the international community over the last 5 to 10 years. Okay, so this is the graph that I was just speaking about, highlighting the significant increases in demand for things like graphite, lithium, and cobalt, and also smaller percentage gains for some of the base metals and other metals, but still demand increases that are going to tax our ability to provide it. And on to the next slide, please. And these are just a few of the examples of some of the things that are driving this demand: the energy transition, the battery electric vehicle transition, and so on. And so part of what we need to do now is acknowledge that this increased demand is headed our way, and ensure that we can provide it to the market, to society, in as responsible and transparent a way as possible, which is where we come in. And if I could have the next slide, which is a title slide. So how are we going to do this? And this is really the focus of Towards Sustainable Mining. And on to the next slide, please. So this is a program that we developed, a standard that we developed and launched in 2004. And one of the unique features of it is, well, first of all, it was the first of its kind mine site level ESG, or responsible mining standard, launched. We've been at this for almost 2 decades. And one of the unique features of it is that it's a requirement for all of the companies that are parts of that belong to the national associations that implemented, of which ours was the first, but we've now been joined by several others. It's also overseen by a multi-stakeholder network of national panels we call our community of interest panels. And I'll talk more about this in a moment, but I just want to underscore that this is not just the mining industry setting its own standards, that this is done in collaboration with civil society around the world. Next slide, please. So these are our partner country associations. So Canada, of course, us being the first, we're joined by Finland, Norway, Spain, Brazil, Argentina, most recently Colombia, that just announced adoption of TSM in the fall, Botswana, the Philippines, and Australia. And we're in discussion with several other associations. So in all likelihood, this will grow in the next year or so. There are 7 things that a mining association adopting TSM has to commit to, and you can see those on the left. They have to have a consistent set of guiding principles. They have to have performance indicators that are measurable at the mine site level. There's some degree of international consistency. There's a high degree of international consistency, but some degree of ability to tailor those to national context, depending on the national association adopting them. Has to be facility level, mine site level reporting, because that's the resolution that people care about in terms of sustainability. There has to be independent verification and public reporting. Each of these national associations has to establish it as a requirement. So it expands and scales up very quickly to help drive performance in environmental and social areas. And each of these countries adopting TSM has to implement a national stakeholder panel. And I'll talk about ours in a moment. If you could just go to the next slide, please. So this is just an example of how stakeholders and rights holders are working in collaboration with us to help drive the agenda around responsible practice and drive performance. So ours consists of about 12 people right now that come from Indigenous communities in Canada, national Indigenous organizations. There are 3 of them. We have 2 people that come from local mining communities, 2 people that come from environmental organizations, and 1 from a social organization. We have academia, organized labor, and the financial sector involved in this, and they all come together to help inform our organization through our board of directors on what the priorities of civil society are in terms of ensuring responsible mining practice. Next slide. And so there are a series of areas that we focus on. So this by no means covers every area that's important in mining, but we have worked with our network of panels to prioritize what we think are the most important. So these are the areas that the standard covers: tailings, biodiversity, water, climate change, Indigenous and community relationships, health and safety, crisis management, and preventing child and forced labor, and a new one that we're just starting to work on, focusing on equity, diversity, inclusion, and respectful workplaces, which is increasingly recognized as being critical for our mines to ensure that we have the kind of workplace culture that we want and that we can use to recruit the next generation of miners. Next slide, please. So under each of those headings, there's a series of indicators that are all reported publicly. So there are 30 indicators right now, plus the new ones that we're working on for equity, diversity, inclusion. And a mine site would report on a score for each of these boxes. So we're not a certification standard. We're a standard that focuses on providing detailed information on how a mine is doing in each of these areas. So for example, there's 5 indicators in community engagement and 3 in crisis management. I'm not going to spend more time going through this because there just isn't time. But next slide, please. This is the letter grade system that we use to score these. So each of our mines will score each of those 30 boxes using a 5-level scale that you see on the screen, with the aim being level A, good practice. That's what we aspire to help all of our mines achieve, and then AA and AAA are about excellence and leadership. There's also a couple of areas where we just simply rate them on yes or no. Preventing child and forced labor and crisis management are simply yes or no aspects. Either you've done the work to comply with the standard or you haven't. Next slide, please. This is what reporting looks like. It's very efficient. So each mine will report their scores, and then we in turn report them publicly. This is Rio Tinto at one of their operations in northern Canada, Diavik, and another iron ore in Quebec. And you can see here for water stewardship, there's 4 indicators, and you can see 4 scores representing how well they do. And you can see the leadership performance from Diavik, and you can see that iron ore still has some room to improve. And so that's the level of resolution that we're talking about here in terms of ensuring practice and providing those incentives to drive that performance from C and B to A, AA, and AAA. Next slide, please. There's an assurance program that goes along with this. All mines are required to self-assess every year and undertake an external verification every 3rd year. And in those years that they undertake verification, our COI panel, our community of interest multi-stakeholder panel I spoke about earlier, will select a couple of companies to undergo further examination subject to civil society questions. So there is a strong degree of credibility. Even though this is an industry-owned standard, we have taken several steps to make sure that the data is credible with a high level of integrity. Next slide, please. One of the stories that this tells is continuous improvement over the whole industry. So these are primarily Canada sites on the board here, but this is our performance over time for community and Indigenous relationships. You can see when we started this in 2006, only about 50% of our mines, 50 to 60%, could meet our level A standard or exceed it. Today, we're into the high 90s, and we've just in the process of introducing a more rigorous, robust standard to continue to drive that performance higher. And so you'd see this for all of the areas that we are focused on. Next slide, please. And this is just another title slide focusing on a position we've tried to take around leading with alignment with other standards and trying to be innovative. So there's a number of slides coming up here that I'll just race through. Next slide, please. This first example is how we've achieved, we're the only standard that has achieved full recognition with 5 other standards: Copper Mark, ICMM, World Gold Council, and the Risk Readiness Assessment, and Responsible Steel, of course. So 6 standards, meaning that you can, with TSM reporting and assurance, you can reduce your standards burden by being eligible to get credit for these 5 other standards through TSM, which is a significant innovation. Next slide, please. We are also working on other integration with more detailed standards, including IRMA and responsible jewelry and others, so that we can further drive consolidation and equivalency within the industry around standards. Next slide, please. We've done an enormous amount of work around the global tailings standard to make sure that TSM and the global tailings standard are interchangeable with a high degree of alignment. You can see at the bottom, only 5 of the global tailings standard requirements are not met by TSM, and the inverse is true too, where there's a few of the TSM requirements that are not covered by the global standard. But it means that you can use TSM or the global tailings standard to indicate strong tailings management performance. Last slide, please, I think. We've just recently been approved into the London Metal Exchange platform as well. So you can use TSM to discharge 2 of your 3 obligations under the LME, which I think is going to be critical in terms of how we trade our products and how we sell our products into the market. And I will skip the last slide because I think I'm at time now. So I'll stop there and I'll look forward to answering any questions. But the very last slide has my contact information on it if you want to go one more. If anybody wants to reach out, I realize this was a very quick tour through TSM, and there's a lot more to share if I piqued at all your interest. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ben. I appreciate the overview and keeping to the time. I know there's very limited time, and I just want to remind everyone we're going to have a Q&A session at the end. But if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll be monitoring the chat so we can also respond right away. I'd like to stick with the sustainability theme and now head over to Mr. Neil Reeder, Vice President, Government Relations at B2Gold. So Neil, please.
Thank you, Lucas. Thanks for the invitation. And of course, B2Gold is very pleased to be a gold sponsor of the discussions today as part of the AME Roundup. So I'm going to talk about success stories around the globe in terms of B2Gold's approach to sustainability. Next slide. Just a cautionary statement. Next slide, please. So here I just wanted to give you a sense of the world view according to B2Gold. Our headquarters in Vancouver. We have 3 producing gold mines in Mali, the Fekola mine, in Namibia, the Otjikoto mine, and in the Philippines, the Masbate mine. We have also in Colombia an advanced development project, which could be our next gold mine, and that decision will be taken later this year. We also have major exploration programs ongoing in Uzbekistan, which of course brings us to the CERBA, and also in Finland. We have a total of about $65 million devoted this year to exploration worldwide. Next slide. This is just meant to show you the growth profile of B2Gold very quickly going over the past decade, going back to 2012 with about 157,000 ounces produced. And this year we're projecting, as you can see, over 1 million ounces produced worldwide. So we've had very, very successful growth, 13 consecutive years of increasing gold production. At the same time, our all-in sustaining costs left to right are declining, which makes the gold miner very happy. Next slide. This slide is just meant to show you some of the countries where B2Gold and our predecessor company B2Gold have operated over the years, and where we have built or acquired mines. We have, our construction team has actually built 8 mines around the world. And given with the CERBA audience, I'll just highlight Russia. In the case of Russia, in the Far East Magadan region, B2Gold built the Julietta mine and was completing the Kupol mine when we were taken over by Kinross. And as a result, the new entity became B2Gold, which went on, as you can see, to continue mining and building mines around the world. On the right, we're just showing you some of the keys to our success in terms of sustainable investments worldwide, delivering on our promises, a win-win approach, ensuring benefits for governments and communities. And these are the core elements of sustainable mining for our company. Next slide. Yeah, now next slide. We'll just turn to sustainability. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the ways as a successful company we can bring sustainable mining to the world. One of the most important impacts of mining, as this audience will appreciate, of course, is the economic impact. And here you'll see from the 2020 numbers, these are US dollar figures, what we have spent in terms of community investments, employee wages and benefits, and payment to governments. And I mention this because we also know that employment in the industry, according to the World Gold Council, every one job in the gold mining sector supports 6 more in the community. I would add to this slide that if you take a country like Mali, which is one of the least developed countries in the world, the impact of our mine, which is the second largest mine in the country, producing 27% of the gold, is quite phenomenal. 2020, $63 million in employee wages and benefits, and over $300 million in taxes paid to government. So it does make for a major impact. Next slide. This slide just talks about our people. This is important in the context of employment. And again, if sustainable mining should generate employment for today and training and capacity building for tomorrow. You'll see on the far left, for example, 97% local employment across all our mine sites. We talk about mines that are essentially run by the local community and run by nationals of those countries to provide the greatest opportunity and benefit to the communities and countries where we operate. The other point that's important there is to transition with a mine investment to a situation where through training and skills and job experience, people will benefit long after life of mine as they move into the larger community. On the second column, I'll just mention on equity. We're very proud of our work, especially to advance women to senior positions. And in the case of Namibia, to advance previously disadvantaged persons who were not given opportunities under the previous apartheid system. And those families today, we're trying to assist them by identifying and advancing young Namibians into senior management in the mine. Next slide. Here, I just want to turn to some of these sustainable community investments that we've undertaken across our mine sites. And you'll see here in the case of Mali, some of the different work that we've done. We're very focused right now on a major community development plan, which will be undertaken over 3 years in order to provide education, training, and skills to local communities, villagers, so that they will have sustainable livelihoods long after life of mine. The last point is very important as well. We partnership with Unicef in 2 different countries, Mali and Namibia. And in the case of Unicef, this is meant to provide education and health assistance to vulnerable women and girls who find themselves working in the small-scale mining sector where they can be subject to pressures and are seen as vulnerable. Next slide. In the case of the Philippines, you'll see here again a number of projects that we're very, very focused on, including a major scholarship program in the country and also a local training center. We partner with TESDA, which is the National Vocational Training Institute in the Philippines, to provide training in welding, equipment machine technologies, etc., to local communities near the Masbate mine in order that we can take those people into the mine, but also give them the skills where they can work in their community. The last project is very important to us as well. Pamana means legacy in the Filipino language, Tagalog. In this case, we're very proud of our seed funding and startup capital that we gave to initially egg and poultry production, which has now grown, as you can see, to a large number of different producers over the course of the year. Next slide. So in the case of Namibia, again, these are important projects that we have supported. What's important in Namibia to understand, for example, the fourth bullet in relation to the education center. A lot of young people in Namibia don't understand and benefit from the wildlife in the country, which is a remarkable country in respect for wildlife diversity and wildlife conservation. So we bring students to our education center. It's an 18,000 hectare wildlife facility that we have outside of the mine. So students and young people, especially from the townships in Namibia, some of them have never seen wildlife in their life. And they can come and do wildlife tours with us and learn about mining, conservation, physics, basic physics principles as well over the course of their visit. The last point just to note is a new project with the San. The San are the last community of First Nations in Southern Africa. They have been on the land in northeastern Namibia for 30,000 years, very marginalized in Namibian society, and we're providing them assistance now with educational facilities and teachers. We're very proud of that particular project to give them a real opportunity to get ahead in life. Next slide, please. Just in terms of this slide, we're just showing you some of the industry best practices that we're following at our various mine sites around the world. In particular, I would just note the mangrove and coral reef rehabilitation projects in the Philippines that we're very proud of. Coral reef was severely damaged by dynamite fishing from fishers outside of the off the mine site, and we've undertaken there to regenerate some 20,000 coral transplants. We've also planted over 1.4 million mangroves. So I just wanted to mention that. We'll move to the next slide just to touch on green mining and some of the sustainable mining practices that we've developed now at our mine sites. So here you're seeing our solar field at our mine in Namibia. We've been an industry leader in promoting solar power at the mine sites. We now have 2 solar facilities at our mines in Namibia and in Mali. Namibia, of course, great solar potential, as is the case in West Africa, and we're taking advantage of that to do the right thing in terms of introducing solar into our power mix. And as you can see, this is a 6 megawatt facility, and again, major reductions here on carbon dioxide emissions, and some 50,000 tons have been prevented from entering the atmosphere since we began that operation. Next slide. Here you'll see our solar field in Mali. Give you an idea of the scope of this. Is quite remarkable. This is one of the largest off-grid facilities in the world. And in this case, it's a 30 megawatt solar facility with a 64 megawatt HFO component. So we're very proud of that. And again, it's the responsible thing to do. We're hoping that as we approach life of mine down the road, these facilities then can be taken over and managed by the national authorities to continue to provide solar power to the local communities. Next slide. And just to conclude on the sustainability portion, this just demonstrates international recognition of our sustainable mining practices throughout the countries where we operate. We're particularly proud last year, or 2021, receiving the Sustainability Award from PDAC, as well as the Most Sustainable Mining Award from the Mining Journal. Next slide. So I'll conclude just with a couple slides on our exploration activities in Uzbekistan, given that we are, of course, with the CERBA audience today. So we're very pleased to be in Uzbekistan. We've had a considerable interest in the country going back to about 2007. And we see great potential because of the very warm environment for investors that we have observed taking place over the last few years. A welcome mat it's open for foreign investment, and we see great opportunity in the gold sector in the country. We're currently the only senior Western gold company that is active in exploration. Next slide. So this slide, it just gives you a bit of an update here. You'll see some of our drilling activities. This is in the Navoy region, which is in the southwest part of the country, in the desert area. We have 3 licenses there with over 30 targets identified. This area has had a long tradition of gold mining, including hosting the Muruntau gold mine, which is the largest in the world. And we're within about 40 kilometers of Muruntau. There's a number of large mines operating in that area, so we feel very good about the potential in that region. Next slide. So as you see, we've committed $6 million to our exploration budget in Uzbekistan for 2022. So that's about 10% of our exploration budget worldwide. Again, we see good potential here. And as you can see, we've got various dimensions of drilling that will go forward over the course of this year. Next slide, just to conclude. Again, we're very excited by the prospects of working in Uzbekistan. I would like to thank Goscom Geology. We heard from the Deputy Director earlier today. Very strong support from Goscom Geology, from the government of Uzbekistan, from the ambassador of Uzbekistan in Washington, who's responsible for Canada as well, and his staff. So we feel very welcomed, and we hope that this will lead to us building a world-class gold mine in the country. We also continue to look for new projects so that we can consider investment on a larger scale. Thank you very much. The last slide just shows you our contacts, Clive Johnson, our president and CEO, and others working with B2Gold. So thank you very much for giving me the time today.
Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation and see B2Gold's investments and their activities.
Thank you.
I'd like then now to go to our original first presenter, which is Michel Garot. He's the Global Director of Hybrid Power at Hatch. And Michel, please go ahead. Oh, we hear you. Perfect.
Okay, so I'll share my screen. Thank you for this opportunity to present. I'd like to discuss a little bit about 100% renewable power mining. This is a very hot topic in different jurisdictions in the world, trying to decarbonize mining operation. But just to start, I'll say a word about Hatch. Hatch is an engineering and consulting company stressing innovations. We've got roots over 100 years, working in more than 150 countries by experience, with 65 offices globally in the Americas, Europe, Africa, in Russia, Australia, and China. We have more than 9,000 people working in energy, infrastructure, and mines and metals. We also have our offices in Russia with more than 150 engineers, project management professionals that service projects to Russia and the nearby countries. Very strong team in the region. And then just to go to the subject, I wanted to talk about a project that we have done and implemented in Arctic Canada. It's in northern Quebec, where temperature goes down up to -50 degrees. We implemented a 6 megawatt wind farm, 2 wind turbines with lithium-ion batteries. We can reach up to 40% penetration numbers on this mine operation that has a load of about 20 megawatts. We implemented a hatch microgrid controller that coordinate the wind power production with the batteries. We also have for wind power excess an electrolyzer producing hydrogen. We have hydrogen storage and fuel cell used to take the hydrogen to make electricity and bring back the stored energy in the form of hydrogen back to the grid. The project has saved nearly 10 million liters of diesel since the beginning in 2014, and the second phase was in 2018, and we're working still on the further phases to implement more wind and solar at the site. The site, as I mentioned, is really north of Quebec, which is in the Arctic and permafrost region of Canada. And that's the red dot that you see for Raglan Mine. Challenges are temperature up to -40 average during January and February. Have to deal with permafrost, very strong wind gusts and blizzards, and the operation with the mine where the wind power is variable, but the operation has a constant production. So these challenges were addressed. We implemented this, what we call the battery storage. As you can see, it's all pretty cold weather in February, where we have an electrical room with a flywheel, the battery systems, inverter, and lithium ion. You see on the right, the fuel cell, the electrolyzer containers, and the 3 hydrogen tanks. As you can see, all buildings are elevated. Here's the battery system, inverter, and batteries in white from SAFT, and the inverter from ABB. Everything is elevated on piles to protect the permafrost. The permafrost, you want the ground to stay frozen. You don't want the heat from the containers to melt the permafrost. And that's why we install the containers on piles. And also by elevating the containers away from the ground, it allows for the wind to blow underneath. As you can see, there's no snow accumulations either. And so it makes this kind of installation perfect for an Arctic environment. In terms of foundations for the wind turbine, we use innovative spider foundations. That's the base of the wind turbine. As you can see, you've got legs, and each of these legs have a pile underneath. And so it's not a gravity concrete base foundation that would not be stable in the permafrost. You never know if the ground is going to freeze. So each of the piles of that foundation is anchored to the rock. And so there's no way that wind turbine can move, even if the ground melts. And so here, that wind turbine was erected at night. We had 3 days to erect it because of the wind speed forecast was on Wednesday to increase significantly. So we started on Sunday, and in 3 days, we erected the entire wind turbine by working 24/7. And you see the crane here elevating the blades of the wind turbines, to the gearbox. The system is controlled by a hatch microgrid controller that talks to the wind and generators and the loads and the energy storage to, at any time of operation of wind power production, you've got a sense of how much the generators must increase their load or reduce their load as a function of the wind power variability. And if there's variability that are too fast, the energy storage ensure to maintain grid frequency and voltage. In short, this is just a pilot project that has scaled up to megawatt scale, but with the beers at Shiljak mine, which is even further north of Raglan mine in the Arctic, very, very remote. We're looking at a concept new mine with 100% renewable that will couple wind and solar batteries with hydrogen. The hydrogen will be used to either fuel hydrogen trucks or use the hydrogen to heat the buildings. And because of the 100% renewable, no diesel, no road would be required to bring the diesel to the mine. That would be a significant capex saving. And we can reach levelized costs of renewables very competitive if you allow also the mine to have a variable load. That is, you produce more when there's wind and you produce less when the wind is not there. And you have some buffer with the hydrogen storage that can also re-inject electricity through fuel cells. So in a nutshell, it's the visions is to move away from fossil fuel in remote minings. And here's a design that would work to bring a project to be 100% renewable. And with the Raglan mine project being implemented and operational since 2014, a lot of lesson learned. And we believe the next step is to achieve that 100% on new greenfield mines. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michel, and I appreciate very much the overview. Very interesting, and I know it's a lot of material in a very short time. Thank you very much. And if there are questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. So just a reminder, we can have questions in the chat, and we have a Q&A session at the end of this conference. I now like to move to Dr. Sergei Samsonov. He's a senior research scientist at the Canadian Centre for Mapping and Earth Observation at the Natural Resources of Canada. And we're going to learn a little bit more about innovation, technical innovations that are going to be useful for the mining industry. So Sergei, please.
Thank you very much. So I'm a senior research scientist at Natural Resources Canada. I'm located in Ottawa right now in my basement. So next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So my job at NRCan is to develop scientific techniques that utilize remote sensing for mapping mining and other objects from space. So in this presentation, I will talk about types of remote sensing very quickly, just to give understanding what type I'm utilizing in these studies. And then I will talk about various examples, which I investigated myself in Canada and Eastern Europe. And then I'll just summarize the presentation quickly. Thank you. Next slide. So remote sensing set of techniques is well developed. It's been with us for many decades, but recently we made a number of progress, mainly because data is widely available, there is processing power, and so on. So there are generally two types of remote sensing sensors located on the satellites, installed on the satellites. It's an optical sensor and microwave sensor. And the optical sensor is probably most familiar, something that we see in the Google Earth. It produces a picture similar to just a photo. A microwave sensor is a radar sensor. It sends and emits signal, and it can see through clouds. It can see through different weather phenomena. It can acquire data during the night. So it has a number of advantages. What's more important, that we can use radar and process data in particular way to measure ground deformation from one or two images, sorry, from two or more images. And using this technique, we can achieve very, very high precision of measurement. For example, we can see deformation up to 1-2 centimeters. So then we can use this technique for a variety of applications. Next slide, please. So originally, this technique was developed for mapping deformation produced by the earthquakes. Like here in this figure, you can see two large earthquakes that happened last year and this year. And there's no scale here, but the deformation produced by these earthquakes is on the order of 1 meter. As I mentioned already, this is a golden age of this processing technique that's called INSAR, interferometric synthetic aperture radar. It's golden age because we have free data acquired by a variety of satellites, and this data is easily to download, easy to access, no permits. The processing resources are very inexpensive as well. We also developed a number of advanced processing techniques that we can utilize that can handle very large amounts of data. We can utilize this technique directly from our office, so no field work required, no travel, no visas, no dangers, and we can access remote regions, including like Arctic, for example, Antarctic, but also the countries that, for example, it's not easy to access due to maybe military conflict or for some other reasons. So now I will show how this technique applied for measuring deformation produced by either mines or by environment on mines. The next slide, please. So this is just the first example. It's not related to mine, but this is the region where most of the speakers located, Vancouver. So on the left, you can see the typical SAR image, radar image. So it's a gray color-coded image. But after performing some processing, we can see image on the right where colors represent how fast the ground moves relative to stable point on the ground. So here the areas in blue and purple basically subside. And we also can extract time series to see how this subsidence progresses over time. And here in this particular case, we did this almost over 20-year period. And you can see at this example, that's the location of the Vancouver International Airport. So the ground was stable until some construction started there, and that started causing sinking of the ground. So the next slide, please. All right, this is a few examples where mining activity causes some impact on the infrastructure, on the habitat, on the environment. So in this study, we investigated ground subsidence produced by potash underground mine in Russia, in Permafrost. So this area is well known. There were a number of sinkholes here, not here on with the green. And also there were various results here produced by the leveling, by the continuous GPS. As you can see, these color-coded lines, these profile lines. But in general, the area was not covered by subsidence was not known. So we collected SAR data, and here on the bottom you can see typical coverage. So from 2012 to 2014, we had data from one satellite. Then there was a gap, and then a new satellite was launched in 2017 that continues acquiring data up to now. So we covered 2 different time periods. And on the next slide, please, you can see these results. Yeah. So when we have data for various orbits, we can actually reconstruct horizontal motion and the vertical motion. So here you can see in the top row, vertical motion on the left, and then the second image, it's the horizontal motion. And from the earlier satellites from 2012 to 2015. And on the bottom, you can see ground subsidence from another satellite. And then for each pixel, we can reconstruct time series. We can see how ground behaves in response to increased mining or any other activities. So these are a sort of scientific results, but then they can be simplified, reported differently, just to emphasize the location of these areas and maybe magnitude. So you can see on the right side of the screen, these are Google Earth images with the contours showing the subsidence in the city. So in this particular case, subsidence happens right in the urban area. So that means the houses, roads get affected, bridges, or pipelines, they crack. So people have to be relocated. So you can see that we can see this from the satellite very easily. I performed this study from my office in Ottawa. Next slide, please. A similar study we repeated in Saskatchewan. So here we actually observed deformation first. You can see those two red circles. So we did not know what caused the deformation. So after some modeling, we actually figured out that the source of this deformation is located at the depth of about 1 kilometer. So then discovering and doing additional investigation, we found that this is actually underground mines. And you can see in this gray image where the contour lines are plotted, these agricultural fields. There is a lake right next to them, and this subsidence, which is about 1 meter per year, eventually will cause the flooding on these agricultural areas and possibly just water flow from the lake. So prior to these studies, there was it was not known that this ground deforms and then there is long-term but such a severe impact possible. The next slide, please. So similar studies are still in progress. Here I produce deformation maps for Donetsk. Sorry, misspelled in the name. You can see that we can, with one satellite image, we cover a very large area, about 150 by 150 kilometers. So it's even very hard to see this, all the signals. So we zoom in to a particular area, that black rectangle outlined, you can see zoomed in. And then, so all those blue points are those coal wells. Actually, it's the ground sinking, subsiding, and it's likely located above the coal wells. So for one of those coal wells, I reconstructed this time series you can see below. For example, you can see that the ground was sinking from 2017 to maybe 2019, and then subsidence rate increased, and the subsidence continues until present. Again, just this time series here can be reconstructed for each pixel on this map, and there are hundreds of sites there, and for mine sites, and they are located above the urban areas, about agricultural areas, there are bridges, there are roads, they're all affected by this, and this is this technique gives us a clear picture of what's happening on the surface. A similar study I started, and it's still in progress for Kuznets Coal Basin. So this is just an image from a Google Earth, and you can see here again all these blue, dark blue areas. These are underground mines, and the ground sinking above them. And just by doing that, perhaps sometimes we can prevent some hazardous situations, but also it's very important for us to understand what's happening and what kind of impact we produce on the environment, because well, it affects infrastructure and also environment. The next slide, please. So this is the second type of signals that we monitor. So in the first type, we monitor impact of the mining on the environment. Here we look at impact of the environment on the mine. So in this area, we look in British Columbia. So this area is affected by, there is a fracking operation is going on here, and there are a lot of pipelines here already established and also being built. So for example, here you can see in blue proposed pipelines, in red is the active pipeline, and also in green, that's the highway. So we studied the entire area covered by these black frames, outlines, but we will concentrate on the small areas so we can see a few things in details. Next slide, please. So again, this is a result that shows horizontal deformation over this entire area, horizontal east-west deformation. And you can see that the rate is not particularly large, only about 10 centimeters per year, right? But over 10 years, that gives us 1 meter of deformation, which is quite significant for the infrastructure. So we're going to concentrate on a few of those even smaller regions outlined in black. The next one, please. I apologize, my dog. So here, for example, in blue, you can see this is a proposed corridor for a new pipeline. And you can see that this area is actually, well, it's an area of active landslide, right? That's basically located on both sides of the river. And without this work, nobody would knew that this area is actually subjected to landslide activity. In the next plot, please, you can actually see already active pipeline in red, is a red line, and well, the area was considered safe until with our study we detected this horizontal motion, so that affects the landslide. Sorry, the pipeline. Yeah, next. This is the last slide. We did a lot of studies in the Canadian oil sands. Here on this plot, you can see these oil pods, and you can see the cycles of injection and extraction of the fluids that support this operation. And in conclusions, I just want to say that remote sensing in SAR technique is used for measuring ground deformation with very high precision and resolution over large areas. We can monitor short-lasting events such as mining collapse, seismic events like earthquakes, or long-lasting events, for example, subsidence caused by mining, slope instabilities, landslides. We can reconstruct time series with approximately 10 days sampling over these large areas. Technique is inexpensive and accessible. It's done from the office, no travel required, no ground measurements required, no visas, no basically other dangers. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me at this email address or just in this chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And it shows an interesting technique and in essence, full transparency. So from your office, from wherever you are, you can see anywhere in the world, you see these days on a millimeter basis how the world is moving. So the next speaker, unfortunately, Konstantin Barabash, he cannot connect. I think he's in Mexico, and there's been some connection challenges. So unfortunately, we cannot hear from Viking Air today. We would have heard something about accessibility with small planes, and specifically for remote areas, this Canadian company is very important as it provides the connection of some of our remote mining areas to larger communities. So we therefore jump straight to Vern Bickham. He's the president of Iridia Medical Limited, and we're going to actually hear about COVID-19, another major challenge for the mining community working in remote areas. So Vern.
Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished guests, and everyone else participating today. Hello from Vancouver. It's a pleasure to be here. And a special thanks to Aaron, Tatiana, and the rest of the CERBA team for the opportunity to be here to share some thoughts with you this morning. It's a bit of a change in sort of direction, I think, with compared to the other innovations. This one is more focused on the medical side and the realities of operating in the context of a COVID era and remote site. So Iridia Medical exists to enable peace of mind for people that are responding to medical emergencies. We provide full spectrum services of a medical nature for remote camps. So we provide physicians, we provide paramedics, nurses, mobile hospitals, transport vehicles, and all of the associated protocols and triaging that comes with that. in particular for northern climates, largely Canada, but the concepts and everything is portable to other jurisdictions very easily. So in the context of today, obviously with a short timeline, it'll be a very brief overview, but hopefully provide some realities of operating in the last couple of years in some of these remote locations. So next slide, please. Great. We are one of those interesting groups that actually has had some previous experience with pandemics and outbreaks and managing and providing guidance to businesses trying to operate in the context of H5N1, H1N1. Now, of course, those were very different viruses. So H5N1 was very virulent and not easily spread. Conversely, H1N1 was the opposite, easily spread, but not particularly virulent. And what's interesting is we were able to draw back to some of that experience. And going into this pandemic, we knew that people would be confused. We knew that people would need very practical guidance. It's disorienting trying to find out what's going on, what's reality, what's fiction. And we also knew we'd have to be creative. That's the reality of operating in this space and providing on the spot and real-time guidance to folks. So we're able to pull some lessons and bring those forward, and it served us very well. Next slide, please. So one of the first things that we observed, and it was the same with the previous pandemics, is you see a lot of activities. People do things. They implement measures. They put signage up. They react in some fashion because they have a need to do something. They're compelled to do it. The problem is that the risk mitigation can be sometimes very conservative and sometimes very liberal. And to the degree that there's inconsistency, that poses a series of challenges. So one of the things that we did very early days was we set about building a bit of a strategy that we could take to any organization in an urban center, in a remote work site, on a glacier, irrespective of where you are. And this is what we've come up with. It's our 5 pillars strategy. So, the main thrust is to try to keep infection out, realizing you can't do that it will get in to some degree, then keeping people apart, then keeping people's hands clean, surfaces clean, and keeping people, helping them avoid touching their face as a means of transmitting the virus. This 5-pillar strategy looks incredibly simple, deceptively so, but to this day is how we counsel organizations, irrespective of scope, size, distribution, and location, as to how they go about dealing with a workforce and trying to keep them safe. And so today what I wanted to do is just dive into one particular pillar, which is what did it look like trying to keep infection out of remote work camps over the course of the last 2 years, going on 2.5. Next slide, please. Well, the very first thing was, we're going to self-assess based on symptoms. So have your people just do a little bit of a self-assessment in the mornings before they go in and decide whether or not they can go to work. So that was great, except it posed a series of problems. The symptomology was ever evolving. First, it was if you have 1 symptom, then 2, and severity and duration and all of these things. And it was a very dynamic environment. And if it's not your space, if you don't live and breathe this, it's very, very disorienting. Very, very confusing. And so that was one of the realities of having to go through this self-assessment. The other one, of course, is if we look at the demographic of the folks that are in these environments, these mines, these are rough and tumble folks. They're used to adversity. They're tough. They're not going to just have a little bit of a symptom and say, that's it. I'm not going to work today. That's not part of the makeup. And so I had to work with organizations to find a way to make it so that those types of opportunities to stay home or stay in your room or be isolated would be possible. Like, how would that actually play out? And it was a bit of a challenge, and it required a little bit of re-engineering some mindsets, because getting an active infection in a very constrained small environment is tough. So that was the challenge of the self-assessment on the symptomology. And then all of a sudden, temperature became one of the prevailing criteria for filtering people. Early stage data suggested that 88% of all of the COVID infections came with an associated temperature spike. So all of a sudden, thermometers were all the rage. In North America, for example, we couldn't source them. It was impossible to get them early stage because everybody had snapped them up, and industrial partners were struggling to find more. So that led to broaden out our supply chain. Let's find opportunities or source abroad. So got some direct sourcing out of China. had our first shipment on a plane on the apron in Shanghai, and it was promptly stolen and reallocated while it was just moments away from taking off. It's just the reality of trying to deal with things. And then ultimately we did get some, but one of the rubs with these types of thermometers as pictured here, which were the prevailing desired versions, is they're subject to ambient temperatures. So a lot of these remote sites are outside. So where you're doing your screening, you have to factor in the fact that there's temperature variances that affect the temperature and thereby render your measures somewhat useless depending on the circumstances. So again, a couple of very simple things that people saw implemented a lot, but some subtleties associated with it. Next slide, please. And then, of course, we ultimately ended up with the ability to do testing. And so in the urban centers that we support, testing happened within about 6 months, I would say, of the initial pandemic. But in some of the remote areas, it required much more time. It was about sort of a year in before testing became mainstream. And part of the reason was because the world attached right from the get-go to PCR, polymerase chain reaction, as being the gold standard for testing. And the rub with that is that for PCRs, you need to have an advanced laboratory to be able to process samples. These advanced laboratories aren't traditionally positioned in very remote locations where mines are. It's not something that is traditionally there. So as a result of that, you had to figure out how you would be able to, number one, get the swab supplies to people, ensure that they were trained properly on this particular collection technique. In early days, it was the skull scratching, nasopharyngeal, very deep collection, which requires a unique skill set. But assuming you could get past that, and assuming you could get the training done, then you had to figure out how you would actually get the samples collected to these labs in urban centers. And so that entailed logistics of arranging hot shots or local commuter planes, things of that nature, to be able to get it into the urban centers. And then one of the rubs that you had to deal with was the delay. So in order you could get all of those pieces put in place, but then I test you on a Tuesday, you don't get a result till Thursday or Friday. If you happen to have been positive, what that meant in between is that you've been spreading that amongst your work group and your community at the workforce. So it was a very interesting challenge to get through. And over time it evolved into, well, now let's start testing people. We can test them at site, but also before we get there. If they come in through typically large projects are feeding and receiving people from lots of different cities throughout. And so then all of a sudden you'd be setting up testing and screening abilities in little hub airports. And again, those are smaller communities, less resources. And so you have to go through the same thing that you arrange for the lab, for the mine site, but you'd have to also do it at these local regional level as well. Next slide, please. And assuming that you could get all of that figured out, you could get the swabs, you could get the training, you could get the local hubs done. Your question then becomes, when do you test? Do you test as people are arriving? Makes good sense, right? You want to filter people out and ensure that they're not, they don't have COVID in the moment. But just because they don't test positive on a test before they arrive or as they arrive, doesn't mean they won't in a couple of days. Knowing how long it takes for exposure to actually manifest, people started to do what we call here day X training, or testing rather. So on day 5, day 6, day 7, and again, it's kind of subjective. There's some science behind it, but landing on exactly what your protocol is going to be is unique to your particular leadership and their desires. But generally, a lot of folks went with the day 5 testing. So test you before you came, test you on day 5. And then the other overlay is in some of these remote locations, you have local communities, the indigenous communities that are very vulnerable. And so you want to ensure and be able to put in all the measures you can so that when you're sending your workforce home, in the event that they are themselves infectious, that you're screening them so that you're not sending them back to their home community and thereby putting a community that is, again, at risk and doesn't have the healthcare infrastructure that the site has and or urban centers. So these are all sort of decision points that had to be made as you're going through and building a program to be able to test your workforce. Next slide, please. And sort of midway through things, I would say about another 6 to 8 months after sort of PCR had started in the camp environments, antigen came along. And antigen testing is the preferred test when it comes down to assessing for one's infectiousness, that is their likelihood of being able to infect others. It's looking for a particular particle on the surface of the viral cells, and in doing so gives you a better measure of that. The rub with that is that now you have to deploy new testing equipment. There's new training, but the benefits are you get results in 15 minutes and then you're able to action something right away versus, as I said, having to wait previously for a couple of days, maybe 3 days. You have more immediate needs or immediate response rather, which had benefits. But again, keeping these kits in transit, temperature control, etc., became a little bit of a unique challenge. Next slide, please. And then anytime you do testing, no matter where it is that you elect to do it, whether it's at a hub, whether it's at site, you need to have, there's an inherent responsibility associated with what you're going to do with positive cases and how are you going to manage them. And so you can envision if somebody's made their way to an airport and they tested positive, how are you going to support them? It may be very challenging for them to get home. They're not likely to be able to hop on a plane and go home after they're positive, get in a bus, local transit, even taxi share services are reticent to pick them up. So what are you going to do if you're going to screen at one of those hub locations? If it's actually in the work site, you may have the ability to isolate them, but what happens if your isolation capacity is exceeded by the number of positives? What do you do then? So there's the big challenge of how it's going to happen, and then who's going to do it. Generally speaking, you don't have a lot of surplus people sitting around with idle time. They're all fulfilling active and needed roles. So in some cases, you had to bolster your team to be able to do the management and support of people in isolation, to do your daily checks, to ensure that what their symptoms look like, to ensure that mental health checks. People, in isolation for early stages, sometimes for 10 days to 2 weeks. That's a tough thing to do, especially in the middle of arguably sort of nowhere. It can be a real challenge. So again, these are some of the subtleties associated with any testing you do, having the responsibility to consider all these factors and have a meaningful way to deal with them. Next slide, please. And as we sort of look at some of the key considerations of dealing with the pandemic, these are the ones that come to mind. So the speed of change, things are happening really quickly. We can all just look at what's happened most recently with Omicron in the last 6 weeks. I know that some people were of the opinion that, hey, the pandemic might be waning, and then Omicron hit, depending on where you were in the world, December, sort of for North America, West Coast, and it's dominated the headlines ever since. All the while, pandemic fatigue is real, and there's still intrinsic level of fear and variable. Some people are scared, some people are not. Your workforce necessarily probably comprises a cross-section of these folks, and how are you going to support them and yet continue to operate in a way that they're going to feel safe? Public health, alignment with public health. So the governing health sector will no doubt have guidance for you, suggestions for you, and you may choose to follow them to a T. You may choose, because you have a controlled environment, to add an additional layer of mitigation. And so stepping through what that looks like can be a real challenge. Obviously, the variants, we've been through Omicron, we have another one coming with 2B, Deltacron is out, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been dynamic to try to stay on top of that. And of course, one of the key things is communications. When people understand why you're doing, they generally are a little bit more supportive of than just a random insertion of a protocol or a mitigating measure. So really, one of the key things we work with our groups is to keep the focus on the messaging and ensuring that people understand why they're doing it. They may disagree, but at least if you give them the context, they've got it. Next slide, please. And as we sort of reflect on things sort of over the period of time, and because we are still in the midst of this, it's not disappearing tomorrow. We all hope and fingers crossed that it will eventually, maybe become endemic and phase out. But for right now, the need is to really be adaptive, to be responsive. We have to adapt to what's happening, react fairly quickly, and throughout, of course, be tenacious. It's not, you need to continue at this and try not to let your guard down, as that's especially in remote work sites where you've got a large community and small spaces. It's very easy to have an outbreak, and managing that becomes a little bit more complex in that environment. So Apologize, I spoke a little quickly, just trying to make sure that I honor the timelines there, Lucas, and get through this. So as last closeout, I do offer my contact information if anybody is interested. And again, the knowledge and the expertise that we have is portable anywhere the world over, and we love to share in the interest of keeping people safe and allowing operations and businesses to continue. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I mean, it's an extremely important topic, specifically in these remote sites, and it keeps the business going. So that concludes our panel. And without further delay, I'd actually now like to introduce Ivan Maltsev, who is going to lead through the third panel that we're having for you. Okay, Ivan, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Lucas. Hello, добрый день to everyone joining us around the globe. I'm Ivan Maltsev and will be the moderator on panel number 3. I'm delighted to introduce our 5 speakers today. We'll be covering Eurasian investment opportunities and advanced financial approaches. We do ask our audience to please save your questions until the end. The panel will be hosting a designated Q&A session. Without any delay, I would like to introduce our first presenter, Vladimir Vasilyev, the General Director of the Northern Forum and the Arctic Regional Voice.
Thank you, Ivan, and I hope to be very brief. Can you just demonstrate my presentation? Thank you. I would like to just briefly introduce the Northern Forum, International Organization of Northern Regions, which was established 30 years ago. Next slide, please. The Northern Forum serves as a platform to assist regions and companies to construct efficient partnership. And nowadays we have 12 member regions from 5 countries, and Lapland province is chairing regions now. But we maintain communications and connections with many other regions all over the Arctic. You see that no Canadian regions are in the Northern Forum yet. Next slide, please. But they used to be very active members in early years till the well-known political situation just 2014. But now we have a very positive signals from Canadian regions, and hope that in coming years some of them will return to the Northern Forum, will rejoin. And we hope to visit Canada this year with the Northern Forum Chair, Governor of Lapland, Mika Ripi, perhaps in June or later, depending on pandemic situation in the world and in Canada in particular. Next slide. So just I would like to show what can be proposed to suggest for business cooperation and regional cooperation in strengthening of these activities. The Northern Forum is an observer organization in the Arctic Council and has great responsibilities to host and to organize several large-scale events this year. You can see the list of these events on the slide. Starting Youth Startup Forum and several forums like the Northern Sustainable Development Forum in Yakutsk, Arctic Resilience Forum in Murmansk, Chamber of Commerce and Business Associations Conference in November in Komi Republic. And next year we have to organize the Arctic Energy Summit, and hope to greet you all in this very interesting event. Next slide, please. And in April, within the International Forum Arctic Territorial Dialogue in St. Petersburg, we will organize the Northern Forum Governors Summit dedicated to regional and youth cooperation within the Arctic Council. And several agreements on cooperation will be signed during the summit. And more hopefully, we will sign agreement also with CERBA. So just our cooperation with CERBA and business associations of Canada will be strengthened in coming months. Next slide, please. And we are going to organize some online sessions, business sessions, named Arctic Business Relations Circle. And for your information, the first meeting of this year will be on February 16, 17, depending on time difference, and will be dedicated to business opportunities, cooperation, and partnership. And you are very welcome to join this online session. You can just also take into account that we have 12 working groups. And if you have any interest in cooperation with the northern region through our organization, you are very, very welcome. So just briefly about our organizations. And next slide, please. You can find more detailed information on our official website. We just are updating this its content now. And in cooperation with the Arctic Portal, large-scale informational portal of the Arctic, we developed just Arctic Business Directory. So, and hope it could be also a very useful tool for all interested parties and for all interested companies. So that's all for now. And I think that Yuliana Derechova will continue with very detailed information about Sakha Republic and mining industry in Sakha. Thank you.
Okay. Well, dear participants of CERBA Mining Conference, thank you for opportunity to present investment opportunities and a few mining projects of the Sakha Republic Yakutsk of the Russian Federation. Sakha Republic Yakutsk is located in the northeast of Russia. It is the largest administrative territorial unit in the world. It occupies a little over 3 million square kilometers. As you may have heard, Yakutsk is rich in mineral resources, pristine nature, unique culture, and traditions of indigenous people. The population of the republic is currently about 1 million people, and Yakutsk holds leading positions in investment climate ranking, gross regional product, mineral resources, and human capital index in the far east of Russia. The population growth and birth rate in Yakutsk shows a stable growth in order to maintain sustainable growth of human potential and improve quality of life. Sakha Republic Yakutsk government developed and implemented 46 social and infrastructure public-private partnership projects with a total of $1.6 billion US. Yakutsk is one of the most important mining regions of Russia. It has a leading place in the Russian Federation in the extraction of diamond, gold, and antimony with significant reserves of rare earth elements such as silver, lead, zinc, and more than 1,800 mineral deposits have been registered for 58 types of mineral and hydrocarbon raw minerals in the Sakha Republic Yakutsk territory. Yakutsk is one of the top 3 gold mining regions of Russia, with 42 tons of gold production reached in 2021. It's also known to be a coal mining region since Soviet times. Its high-quality coking coal has a high demand in China's and Japan's major steel manufacturers. The forecast for coal production in 2021 is expected to be 31 tons. Yakutsk is among top 10 regions in Russia with the highest gross regional product per capita. Industry accounts for 50.6% of the total GRP volume. The volume for the foreign trade turnover is expected to be $4.3 billion US. The commodity structure of the export is dominated by minerals such as raw and polished diamonds and coal. There are 2 territories of advanced special economic zones that provide favorable investment conditions such as tax incentives and various benefits applied for its residents. For example, Yakutsk ACZ allows development of small and medium-sized enterprises that produce construction materials and supply the city of Yakutsk and the nearby territory. South Yakutia is the largest industrial center for natural resources processing in the far east of Russia, with an export of coking coal to Pacific Asia. Chalmers, for example, is one of the main residents of South Yakutia ACG that produced more than 25 million tons of coking coal since 2017. Prospects for development of the mineral resources in Sakha Republic Yakutia is determined by various factors such as geologically explored and preliminary estimated potential of suboil and mining industry. Sakha Republic Yakutia will receive more than 4 billion rubles from the federal budget for geological study for oil and gas, gold and silver deposit. Funds will be provided for the next 3 years. Investment projects are provided with the state regional support, which makes it possible in difficult conditions to increase the financial stability of projects, make them attractive for investors. For example, development of Elga Coal Complex has been a member of Sakha Republic Yakutia Regional Investment Project Program since 2015. The program provides corporate income tax relief in the form of reduced tax rate for the first 5 years from the date of receipt of the first profit from the project, and it is 0% for the second 5 years and 10% in terms of income tax. Chalmers projects have been residents of South Yakutia ACZ since 2017, which also provides various incentives and preferences. Construction of Nezhdaninsky mining and processing plant received an infrastructure support from Russian federal budget. The regional project, tin mining project, Yanolova, has been a member of the Arctic zone of the Russian Federation since 2020. The resident status allows receiving benefits on federal, regional, local taxes, reimbursement of part of the cost paying insurance premiums, and etc. Canadian Silver Bear Resources successfully operates in the northern part of Yakutia by its subsidiary Prognos. Silver mining complex at the Vertikalny deposit had officially started in 2019 at the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, Russia. The company invested over 7 billion rubles. As a part of social responsibility program, Prognos and the government of the Sakha Republic Yakutia signed an agreement on social and economic cooperation in 2016. Prognos supports indigenous community of Kobayatsky districts where the company operates currently. Development of Sevaglinskaya iron ore deposit plans to obtain the status of South Yakutia ECZ in 2022. As well as development of Kuchus gold deposit is a potential participant of the regional investment program. As you can see, the government of the Russian Federation and the government of the Sakha Republic Yakutia offers various forms of support for investors, including ACC preferences, regional investment program, and the Arctic zone of the Russian Federation preferences. Sakha Republic Yakutia is open for economic, trade, and investment cooperation. I'd be happy to answer questions. My contact information is in this slide. I believe this event will be a next step for our fruitful and mutually beneficial cooperation development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vladimir and Juliana, for your speeches. Our next speaker is Darren Klink, the President and Director of Aras Minerals. Will be talking to us today about advancing in the land of giants.
Thanks very much, Ivan, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks very much to CERBA for the opportunity to participate, and also a special hello to Ambassador Kamaldinov, who we'll see later today here at the Roundup Conference in Vancouver. And also to Ambassador Hampson. We haven't had a chance to meet, but look forward to connecting with you in Nur Sultan in the coming weeks or months. Myself or my partner in this enterprise, Tim Barry. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and so as is most publicly or private companies, you have an obligatory forward-looking statement, but RS Minerals, I'm here to speak about RS Minerals and our brief experience so far in Kazakhstan. RS is a private company that was spun out of a publicly traded Canadian company last year, and our sole focus is in Kazakhstan. We're quite active on the ground. Last year was really almost our first full year of operations, and the company has been successful in raising more than $10 million Canadian to fund these mineral exploration activities focused in the northeastern part of Kazakhstan, about 3 hours by car from Nur-Sultan. Next slide, please. So why Kazakhstan for RS? It was really my partner, Tim Berry, on this about 2 years ago, had started to explore globally in terms of opportunities to focus, looking for an additional project opportunity or projects opportunities. And while Kazakhstan is not, perhaps as well known in the capital markets in North America, from a mining perspective and a mineral development perspective, he was very pleasantly surprised with what he saw. And over the last 12 to 18 months, we've continued to be impressed and have been able to move things forward. We feel that we do have an early mover advantage in the country. As Ambassador Hampson had mentioned, Canada and Canadian companies are often looked at as global leaders in mining and exploration. We would say that RS is actually one of those leaders in Central Asia from a North American junior explorer's perspective. Ambassador Kamaldinov also mentioned in his address this morning around the focus on mineral exploration and incentivizing junior companies, in addition to the larger companies, to be active in Kazakhstan to really unlock that mineral opportunity for the people and for the country. And the opportunity that we've really been focused on here since getting involved is the Muskoga project, where we have an option to purchase 100% of that, as I mentioned, in the northeastern part of the country. Additionally, we've also been quite active on expanding our land package through acquiring additional licenses focused on copper gold. And as was mentioned in a few of the presentations earlier as well, of course, as the world continues to move forward with electrification, we believe Kazakhstan is a top 10 already producer of copper in the world, will be one of the go-to places, I think, to try and explore and invest to develop more copper resources that the world is going to continue to need. Next slide, please. So, to kind of summarize and go over some of the differentials in what we see in Kazakhstan and what's important for a mineral explorer. Obviously, we've got, when we're exploring for resources, you start with the entire globe. And then you start working down from there in terms of a variety of different parameters that one would look at. And the first and foremost is the geology. Kazakhstan has very prospective geology. Obviously, the oil and gas business in the western part of the country has been very successful over the last 20 to 30 years. But I think, unbeknownst to many, it is a top 10 producer of many other minerals from mining, of course, uranium being one, and I have a slide a little bit later on that, globally. So it's very well positioned. And also one of the very few jurisdictions where you can find these prospective belts and still acquire licenses in order to explore on. So that was quite attractive from our perspective. Probably one of the most important things was some of the recent reforms, and Ambassador Kamaldinov spoke on that, and I think we'll continue to see more of that more holistically, in Kazakhstan, but specifically with regards to the Mining and Minerals Code. The adoption of a new mineral law in late 2018, based on Western Australian Mining Code, I think was a big check mark and really demonstrated wanting to kind of move more towards, some of the Western nations like Australia and Canada, and how those countries have set up their mineral code. Sends a very strong message, and I have a slide a little bit later that also shows, some of the various companies that have started to arrive or continue to invest in Kazakhstan on the basis of some of these strong reforms. We've also experienced to date quite quick turnarounds when approving license applications and work programs. These are important aspects, particularly when junior companies are really at the mercy of the capital markets to raise capital and to move project forwards, to invest dollars in the ground, and hopefully of making discoveries and be able to advance those assets to bring those minerals out of the ground. And so our experience over the last 12 months has been quite positive in that regard as well. No doubt, as I mentioned before, with regards to the ability to look broadly, globally, when it comes to mineral development, but support for mineral development from the government is one of the first things that companies such as ours will look at and look to, and that really kind of transitions right into investors as well. The investors that are prepared to back these ventures in order to invest in mineral development. The government of Kazakhstan has been very clear about that. Ambassador Kamaldinov mentioned it in his address. The president earlier this year, or this month in January, also mentioned the priority for investors in the exploration space and more broadly, and the safety of those investments. And of course, that's a key thing that we need to look to as executive management when we're looking for opportunities around the world. I think also that recognition of the Western approach to doing business, and that's obviously what RS Minerals as a Canadian company brings. The president had mentioned that in his address earlier this month as well. And so those are all positive, aspects that give us continued comfort and strength as we look to continue our investments and increase those investments in Kazakhstan. Changing the rules partway through, whether it be taxation rules or rules with regards to land tenure, is usually a nail in a coffin that countries and governments do not want to go into, because it erodes that credibility and really can set countries back by years when that happens. And we haven't seen any of that in Kazakhstan, quite the contrary, in fact, and very much appreciate the support from the embassy and Kazinvest. I know Almazan's on this call as well in Washington. Other considerations, of course, for us as a junior company, and I think one of the only North American juniors in Kazakhstan or in Central Asia, is the sound bites that come. One of the more recent ones was some of the challenges that Centerra's had in Kyrgyzstan. Again, because we've got a region that is not well understood in North America, and perhaps will be better understood after this presentation today. Part of our job as well is to differentiate, between the countries and the different policies that obviously underline and provide the foundations for business. And it's great to see Ambassador Kamaldinov out in Vancouver this week for the Roundup ENPC conference, in fact, doing exactly that. And I mentioned earlier as well, considerations at the end of the day, we have to be able to raise capital in order to invest in advanced projects. This is risk capital, obviously, because we're hoping to make discoveries in advanced projects. And having that stability, with your project, with the governments, with the support, is absolutely imperative in order to continue to move projects along. So those are aspects that all companies would look to, and we're very very positive on what we see and what we've seen so far in Kazakhstan, and the continued support to really develop champions in our industry. Next slide, please. So the next couple of slides are just a couple of slides that talk about some of the statistics. I think one of the things that resonates quite well, speaking with investors with regards to RS, and in fact was a surprise to myself as well, not being an expert in Central Asia at all, was how fast Kazakhstan has moved up the list in terms of the doing business ranking. You can see on this slide here that in fact Kazakhstan is tied equally with Canada on the ease of doing business rank that the World Bank puts out every year on almost 200 countries in 2020. And so I think Kazakhstan has been moving up, and Canada, as Don Lindsay had commented, the chief executive of Tech, I think last week in a newspaper article, has been moving down. But this bodes very well for Kazakhstan, and I think also demonstrates the importance of the stabilities and removing bureaucracy and having the right regulations in place rather than regulations that potentially slow things down. Next slide, please. And apologies, I see the formatting's off a little bit. I suspect it's because the way it's being presented, but and this also, kind of an overview with regards to Kazakhstan when it comes to mining. I mentioned before around the modernized mining code based in Western Australia. Competitive fiscal terms as well to get mines up and going. This is important, and also I commented that changing the goalposts when it comes to taxation to incentivize companies to make investments and then down the road change those is not a positive. I mean, at the end of the day, obviously there's a lot of risk capital that goes into our business. I think on average today, from a first discovery through to a mine takes 15 years or more. So that's 15 years of investment in capital before it actually comes out of the ground. And so it's important to maintain that stability. But definitely something that I think stands out is, today in terms of minerals that are being produced in Kazakhstan, of course, well known as the leader in uranium. And as we move towards clean energy across the board, I think that's going to become more and more important. But chromite, titanium, zinc, copper, as we talked about, iron ore and coal, and then of course oil production a little bit further down the list. So very geologically endowed and just a huge opportunity, I think, over the next 20 to 30 years for the country. Next slide, please. So this just gives a snapshot of some of the companies that are active and many very well-known names. As you see, you can see Aris is up in the northeastern part of the country, just east of Kaz Minerals Boshkol copper mine. Again, apologies, I see the text is kind of a little bit out of whack. I think probably should have sent the PDF, but you'll get the gist here. Central Asian Minerals, a London-based company, has been very successful with regards to producing copper at the historic Kunrad mine. Of course, more well-known names like the Rio Tintos and the Glencores have quite big presence here. In fact, Glencore has more than 20,000 employees in the country, and I think 20% of their EBITDA last year came from Kazakhstan. Fellow Canadian Cameco, of course, has an operation in Kazakhstan, highly successful with Kazatomprom. And then some of the newcomers, Fortescue out of Australia has come in quite a big way, and you've got other companies that are, starting to look at opportunities as we understand it. BHP, First Quantum, Samsung has 2 operating smelters in the country, and so some fairly well-known brands and names in our space, but a paucity of juniors. Palace, being a junior out of London, is active in the Northeast, and also another London-listed company just recently has listed East Star Minerals. But I think that as we move forward over the next 2 to 3 years, there's the potential for this to start to change and become a little bit more of a cluttered field based on some of the points that I've raised earlier. Next slide. So really, in closing, I think for Aris, we're very excited to be 100% focused in Kazakhstan. The support that we've had to be able to raise, over $10 million Canadian over the last number of months to invest in the country, I think bodes well. And, it's from investors throughout North America and in Europe and the UK predominantly. But ultimately, I mean, we're quite excited about a highly prospective yet underexplored copper gold belt. The world does need more copper, as we've talked about in a couple of presentations so far today. We think we've got a good place to start in the Muskoka project in the Northeast, but are also focusing on expanding our land package and really doing good exploration and geology work. And And I think then, with the partnership with our government partners in Kazakhstan, we feel that there's a bright future ahead for ARIS and also for mineral development in Kazakhstan, and we look forward to being an important part of that over the next few years. And that was one of the more stunning surprises for me, having never been to Nur Sultan, but that was a picture out of my hotel room, not what I expected to see. One of the more modern cities I think you could see anywhere. Very impressive, and ultimately I think there's been a lot of investment in the country for infrastructure. One of the things that stands out for us as well, the road and the power, rail infrastructure. This is all good stuff when it comes to developing mineral projects, and Kazakhstan is well endowed in that. And just the last slide with our contact information. So thank you very much again to CERBA, and welcome any questions during the Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Darren. So for our next speaker, we have Peter Maglchan, the president of Gold Deposits and Exploration Projects of Kholskaya group of companies. I'll let you take the virtual microphone over. And just a friendly reminder that we have a 10-minute speaking engagement for the remaining speakers moving forward.
Good day to you, dear colleagues. I represent Kholskaya group of company that mines gold and silver on the territory of Khabarovsk region. We mine ore based on 5 licenses. Again, we operate in Khabarovsk regions, and we also hold 18 licenses for geological survey. And we mine in open and closed mines. We also hold several more licenses for geological survey. We organize infrastructure in remote areas, and the Khabarovsk region does not have very extensive infrastructures. There are not many airports or ports, but we provide not only mining operations, but we also do transportation and cover distances up to several hundred kilometers. We are looking for partners with whom we could develop our operations and could do survey together. We are ready to set up joint ventures with potential partners based on our experience, on our competences, on our expertise. And we've been demonstrating our expertise for around 8 years. We start from the initial stage, from survey up to mining all the resources that have been discovered, and we are ready to engage third parties. We are also ready to construct our own processing facilities. So we are looking for strong partners who could take this whole journey together with us. As for the territory of the Khabarovsk region, it is equal to 700,000 square meters. The population is 1.3 million people. Mainly, these people live in central or southern regions, while the corporations take place in northern part of the region, and the territory itself is not really well explored. And if you look at all the roads of Khabarovsk regions, and if you make a single line, the distance will be just 6,000 kilometers. So that gives you an understanding how that this area is not really well explored, and I'm sure there are so many more deposits to be discovered there. Here you see a list of our geological licenses that we use for operating in Khabarovsk region, and we are ready to attract partners. In order to receive these licenses, we have done a great deal of work. We studied data that was provided by Soviet geologists who did exploration back in the Soviet times and who found first deposits of ore. And again, today we have this package of licenses, and overall forecast for metal deposits is 166 million tons for gold and 134 tons for silver. Of course, this is only a forecast. However, we believe that these deposits can be proven and they can turn into metal ounces, and we can at a certain point of time we can move on to mining. Let me give you some success stories of large companies that took similar journeys. Amur Minerals received a license for Malmalishskaya ore field back in 2006, and within 3 or 4 years it's did a survey in exploration in this region, and then successfully sold this license to a Russian corporate company in 2018 for $200 million US. And of course, with today's cost of copper and gold, we can believe that today's cost of DIL would be far larger. Another success story has to do with Chubaitan deposit. Next slide, please. That's the company, Russian company, Tretia Gornorodная Company, received license back in 2012. They did exploration operations, and in 2019 they sold the company to Kinross Gold for $293 million US. And believe us that we have licenses with very promising prospects, and I believe that synergy effect can provide excellent results. Of course, on our own, we're not able to carry out the needed scope of work. We can do exploration based on 2 or 3 licenses, but not on 18. And I believe that we can discover deposits of the same scope on our territory, and we can carry out joint projects. If any of you are interested in cooperation with us, you may find contact information here. We are ready to look at any form of cooperation. I'm the owner of the company, and I can continue negotiations, and I will welcome any of you and hope for cooperation.
And for our last speaking engagement here on panel 3, I would like to introduce Dava Orcher, the president of Max Mining, who will be discussing potential mining and energy projects in Mongolia.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm very glad to be and participate in this conference and also introducing our mining project. Please allow me to introduce Mr. Ikhbayar. He is my associate, and he will introduce our project. Thank you.
Good morning and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me quickly go through our slides, and I hope I sound clearly. So, I'd like to introduce the Max Group. Max Group is one of the leading group companies in Mongolia, established in 1992, and this year is our 30th anniversary. And we operate in various business industries. We have over 20 subsidiaries and related companies with 2,500 employees. For the mining businesses, we have 21 special licenses throughout the country, of which the 11 are the mining licenses. And here on the slides, I'm going to introduce the 3 of the mining projects. The first one is named Hang Altai Gold Project. It locates in Western Mongolia, Gobi Altai province. We started the exploration in the potential project area in early 2010, and along the way we have discovered copper deposit, and in 2018 we have discovered this gold deposit. And since then we performed all the geological exploration that complies with JORC standard, and we, based on the 2019 and 2020 exploration data, we have a JORC compliant resource of 85 tons of gold. But our exploration is still ongoing, and we are planning to update our resource in 2 months. So these are the mining license areas. On the left-hand side is the gold project license area. On the right-hand side, smaller one, is copper project license area. This map shows the potential mineralization zones of both deposits. Based on 2020 exploration data, in other words, 197 drill data, we have estimated 102 million tons of gold resource. At the end of 2021, last year, we completed overall 315 drill holes. So our resource will increase based on the last year's exploration data. And we classify our ores into oxide and primary ores. And to develop this project, we have 2 phases of development. Obviously, the phase 1 development will focus on the oxide ore processing. The processing capacity is 3 million tons per annum, and we are planning to start the operation by fall this year. The phase 2 development will focus on the primary ore, and at the moment, our conceptual processing capacity is 5 million tons per annum. At the moment, phase 1 development is already like 50% completed. We are under construction stage. At the project site, our all mining overburden removal already commenced, and our leach pad and processing plant construction is already completed more than 40-50%. The second project that I'm going to introduce is the copper project that's located side by side to the gold project. We already estimated our resource, which is 26 million tons of copper ore resource that contains 110,000 tons of copper resource. The ore type is oxidized, and it will be processed through heap leaching process, followed by solvent extraction and electrowinning. So we're going to produce a pure copper cathode. The current conceptual capacity is 10,000 tons of copper production per year. But at the moment, we are planning to extend our exploration to the further potential mineralization zones. The third project that I'm going to introduce is the lime plant project. This project is based on the limestone deposit also in Western Mongolia, in Gobi Altai province. The deposit has the resource of 35 million tons of limestone resource. Based on our current processing capacity, the mine will be operational more than 80 years. So this project will be developed in 3 stages. First stage, which will be operational by September this year, is a lime production plant. The capacity is 120,000 tons per annum. And the phase 2 development will be for the Euroblock production plant. The production capacity is 400 cubic meters per day. And the phase 3 development for this project is the extension of cement production plant based on the lime. So this project is under planning and designing stage. The construction phase will start within a few weeks when the weather becomes warmer. So in order to develop these mining projects in Cobalt area, we need a reliable power source in terms of the infrastructure. And to be honest, in Western Mongolia there's no major power source in Western Mongolia. So we look at it as an opportunity to develop energy projects in that region. So we plan 2 power projects. First is a wind farm project. The location is nearby to our mining projects. We already started the wind measurements back in 2020, and based on our measurements, the average wind speed is 7.6 meter per second. So it's quite promising that we are planning to proceed our measurement for another 12 months to comply the international standards for the investment purposes. Once we finalize the measurements, we're going to proceed to the feasibility study stage. The other energy project that I'm going to talk about is the hydropower plant project that's based on the regional river in Kobayalta province. This project will operate in support of the current operational hydropower plant project in Kobayalta region. The conceptual capacity is 13 megawatts of power. And this project is under fundamental study stage, and we need to perform all the feasibility studies and planning designing stage before we proceed to the construction. So Max Group at the moment invested roughly $30 million for the above mentioned projects, and there's a $300 million further investment needed to develop all the projects that we mentioned. So here's our contact information, and we would be happy to answer the questions if you have any. Thank you.
Big thank you to our final presenters. That will be the end to panel number 3. Thank you very much to remaining speakers for your very informative presentations. And now I'd like to pass the virtual microphone back to Tatiana. Thank you, everyone. Большое спасибо.
Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, everyone. So now we are switching to the questions and answers session. And I am passing the stage to the moderator of the session, Erin Campbell. Erin.
Good morning, everybody, and what a wonderful selection of speakers and panelists. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your backgrounds, the important work that you're doing, and really looking forward to the questions and answer session. Before we begin that, just because we're running a little bit behind, I'm going to introduce Jonathan Buchanan. Jonathan Buchanan is the representative of the Association for Mineral Exploration. He's the director of regulation and technical support, and he's here to give greetings on behalf of the Association for Mineral Exploration. So Jonathan, are you with us to give some quick greetings?
I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. Okay, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to people who are out east. My name is Jonathan Buchanan, Director of Regulatory and Technical Policy at the Association for Mineral Exploration. I'm coming to you from the Vancouver Convention Center on the unceded territories of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. And it's my honor to speak to you from our AME Roundup Conference. First, I'd like to congratulate CERBA on its 11th annual conference in conjunction with AME Roundup. It's a great time to get together and explore all the opportunities that exist around the world for mineral exploration and mining. And also, it's great to hear about the various projects in Eurasia and the application of innovation at all these projects. We're also pleased to have Iridia Medical providing COVID rapid testing at our own conference. So thank you to Vern and his team for that to help keep our members and delegates safe. And it's just great that we have all this enthusiasm and energy starting the year 2022. So in terms of AME Roundup, thank you to those who are attending or plan to attend. It's great to see the energy at what is essentially the world's first major hybrid conference focused on mineral exploration, probably in the world. So thousands of attendees, and we're very pleased that more than half have joined us in person for those connections that really help make deals, help make partnerships, some great conversations, and also some great connections online. So for those of us who haven't been able to join us in person at the convention center, people have been attending from all around the world and providing their thoughts and ideas. We've got, of course, our technical sessions, other conference sessions focused on environmental, social, and governance best practices. It's the 10th year of our gathering place that connects Indigenous communities with the mineral exploration sector. Certainly lots happening both at the convention center and online. And AME Roundup is the flagship event of our association, the Association for Mineral Exploration. 2022 marks the association's 110th anniversary in both representing people exploring in BC and also those people based in companies based in Vancouver, but exploring in now about 100 countries around the globe. So we're thrilled to be able to bring everyone together. And of course, if you haven't registered for Roundup already, registration's open again for both online and in-person attendance. And I certainly look forward to seeing some of you in person and in meetings over the next week. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today, and back to you, Erin.
Great, thank you very much, Jonathan, and thanks for, I know you've got a busy conference, so thank you for taking a few minutes to welcome our guests from all over the world, actually.
You're very welcome.
Wonderful, so now we're going to move on to the question and answer portion. I've received some questions already in the chat function, so I would welcome any of you that have questions of any of our panelists just to put the questions in the chat function, and we can certainly answer as many as we have time for. Tatiana, I am conscious that we are over time. How much time would you like to give for question and answers?
I think maybe 10-15 minutes the max, because we're really running out of 3 hours.
We have so much content. We need a whole day now. We can't do this in 3 hours anymore. We need a whole day for all of this. And I know that there's lots of people that want to socialize and chat with each other. And I hope you guys can reach out and connect virtually if not able to meet in person. So is Neil Reeder still here from B2 Gold? Neil, are you still with us?
I don't actually see Neil.
No, unfortunately, he had to leave. So he was, he let me know so that if there's questions, we can forward it to him. But unfortunately, the B2 Gold team had to leave.
Super. Well, one of the questions that I've got for companies that are operating in northern Canada or northern climates, how do you deal with how are you dealing with the expenses, logistic expenses, transportation expenses associated with working in those areas? And I'd welcome anyone to step in and answer that. Lucas, maybe you've got some thoughts just around what you're seeing companies doing to deal with the particularly road building and other logistics costs.
Yeah, I mean, I can try to answer that from my experience working with Northern community. Maybe Michelle, you want to add to that as well with some of your remote areas. It is a big challenge, and a lot of the mining projects are not economic because of that. Now, there's two changes. I mean, climate change does help to that extent. So it allows some of the sea routes to be more accessible. So having access through northern sea routes is one way of increasing the economics of such projects. And the other aspect is that governments need to support or are supporting some of the access routes. I mean, we've seen this in the slave region here in the Northwest Territories in Nunavut, that there are plans that on a federal or territorial basis that governments are partnering with the private industry and develop some of the roads that access these mines. We've seen this in Alaska as well, where roads have been built in collaboration with governments and make it economic feasible.
Maybe I can add to this. It's a very interesting subject, and that's one of the very big strengths of Canadian mining. Just to mention three mines, Raglan mine in northern Quebec, you have Meliadine mine, which is in Nunavut, just on the west side of Hudson Bay, and then you also have Divik mine, which is northern territory. And so these big players, they either own their own ships, they will have to operate 9 months of the 12, or where the ship can operate, but 3 months out of the 12 years they cannot, due to ice conditions or due to treaties with the First Nations. And so in terms of fuel, you may need to have 6 months worth of storage on your site. For Divik mine, to get to the mine, it's all by ice roads. The ice roads operate 8 weeks during the year. So anything you need to transport up in terms of diesel or down in terms of ore is done by trucks during those 8 weeks. So very challenging, but it's know-how. It's a know-how that the mining industry knows in northern Canada.
Thank you, Michelle. Does anyone else have any observations or comments to make about the challenges of working within these permafrost or northern areas? I know our friends at Viking Air would just say, just fly everything in, you don't need roads.
You cannot fly diesel, too heavy.
Yeah, good point. Good point. That's great. Were there other questions from the audience? If not, I've got another question here for the groups that are operating in Kazakhstan, including Eris as well as others. Have you found that there's a greater interest in partnering on development of projects with other juniors, or is it still really much larger organizations, larger majors that are willing to go into Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, other Eurasian jurisdictions?
It's Darren here from RS. I can probably comment. From a partnership perspective, we're pretty new, so we're not necessarily really seeking partners with other juniors. I think there's strength in numbers. So I definitely encourage folks and other companies to take a look. As I mentioned earlier, not a well-known part of the world, you're in Central Asia when we sit here in North America. But I think if we have, hazard a guess over the next 2 to 3 years, that'll probably change. But definitely we've had engagement and discussions, and even here at the AIM-BC Roundup, of course, where you see a lot of geological professionals come. We had some rock samples that arrived on Friday, and I was busy preparing those in my carport on Saturday so they could be on display yesterday and today, and so definitely I think it all helps. But yeah, it's still early days, I think, from a junior exploration perspective. But plenty of larger companies that are active there and are getting more and more active for many of the reasons I mentioned in the presentation. Thank you.
Super. Thank you very much. I know we've got representatives from the Embassy of Kazakhstan as well here in Canada. Do you have some thoughts about what you're seeing in terms of interest from smaller companies to come into into Kazakhstan and look at opportunities there?
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. I hope definitely we are seeing great interest from not only the big players in the mining industry, but also from the junior companies and the new subsoil use code and all the efforts of the government are aimed at attracting investors in mining area, especially in the junior mining companies. And we do hope that the success stories like with the Aras Minerals will help to promote Kazakhstan as a prospective country for junior mining companies from Canada. Definitely, it's a very good success story, and we hope that we will have more junior companies in near future, and our country is definitely implementing a lot of measures and efforts, and also the investments and changing the environment for the attracting the junior companies also.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, if there's further questions, again, I would welcome you to connect individually. What I'm going to do now is hand the session back to Tatiana so that she can wrap up from what was a very productive day. I think we could have all spoken much longer on a much more detail, and what I'm gratified to see is the interest and enthusiasm and excitement about continuing to build the important relationships between Canada and Eurasia in the mining sector. It's clearly one of the areas of great connection between Canada and Eurasia, and lots to learn from both sides, from all sides, in terms of technology, access to opportunities, and just really pleased that we can continue the relationship building that we've been doing for now 11 years, Tatiana.
Very hard to believe that it's already 11 years passed since Roger Richet at B2Gold first told us, why don't you guys do the conference on the margins of AME Roundup? So this is what we did. Okay, thank you, Erin. And thank you everyone who participated at our conference today. I think it was a long run. It's the first time we're doing something like that for 3 hours out of Vancouver. So I think it was very productive, very interesting presentations. And before we end this session, let me make a couple of announcements. First of all, I invite everyone to look through the conference brochure which we prepared for this conference and which is published at the webpage of this conference at CERBA website. You will find a calendar of CERBA events which is upcoming, and it's a lot of different things we are offering, including international business missions and some events within the mining series, which is going to happen in Canada. And one of those events, which is pretty remarkable, and it's a CERBA brand event, it's a CERBA Eurasia mining conference on the margins of PDAC in Toronto. You know that Toronto conference is happening in June. So CERBA conference is taking place on the 14th of June. And it will be a very substantial event. So please keep in touch with us, and we will be sending information to you as it comes. The other thing which I also invite you to do is please check our podcast series. It's an interesting initiative which was kicked off last year. And we had podcasts with a number of remarkable people, including government officials, ambassadors, businessmen, celebrities. So please see it on our website. We have all the links there, and you can choose what podcast you would like to hear. As for this particular conference, it is recorded. We will edit it a little bit and we'll post it on YouTube, so you can see it or hear it or just read the chat. So every particular piece and bit and piece of this conference will be available for you. So please connect with me or with my colleagues and require whatever information you want to have at your disposal. And at the end, I would like to one more time express our gratitude to our gold sponsor, B2Gold. I have to apologize with some technical problems which we had today, but it's affected a number of our speakers, unfortunately. What can you do with the technical things? You know, internet is internet. You cannot really influence much of it. So thank you, B2Gold company, for your continuous support of our organization. I also would like to thank again Association of Mineral Exploration, BC, the Canadian Permafrost Association, and the Global Affairs Canada for making this event possible. And to all people who are still online with us, I one more time would like to wish a successful and prosperous new lunar year, as well as the regular year. And let's stay in touch. Thank you so much. And good night, Eurasia, and have a productive day, Canada.
Thank you. Thank you.